Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Chose League over UA? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Let's begin. After a long day of trying to keep up with Endeavor, Midoriya pored over his notes in the agency's gym with Todoroki at his side. He was so engrossed in his analysis that he didn't hear footsteps approaching. "What are you two still doing here?" Midoriya looked up to see Bakugou, water dripping from his hair. Midoriya smiled and said, "We were waiting for you to finish your shower, Kaken." Bakugou grimaced and shouted, "I don't need you two to wait on me." Todoroki spoke calmly, "We thought it'd be nice to walk back together." "Nice, my butt?" Bakugou shouted, turning towards the exit. "Whatever. Let's go." "Right." Midoriya jumped up, with Todoroki following behind him. The training with Endeavor was hard, but Midoriya had never felt happier. Bakugou had finally calmed down since their battle over All Might's retirement. They still had a competitive relationship, but Midoriya was glad Bakugou didn't hate him. As for Todoroki, he was quickly becoming Midoriya's best friend. They were comfortable and trusted each other. Unlike Bakugou, Todoroki's presence could easily calm Midoriya's anxieties. As they walked through the agency's dorm hallways, they heard many sidekicks gossiping about the recent attacks in and around the city. Villains and accidents were at an all-time high, filling the halls with confusion and worry. Todoroki broke the silence, saying, "Ever since All Might retired, crime has skyrocketed." "Yeah, but it doesn't make sense that the crime rate is rising in the new #1 hero city," pondered Midoriya. "Wouldn't villains prefer to commit crimes in areas with weaker heroes? It wasn't long ago that Endeavor defeated an enhanced Nomu. The fact that even my father can't keep up must mean this isn't just about the number of crimes. It's also about the experience level of the villains involved." "Do you think it could be the League of Villains?" asked Midoriya, his expression turning serious. "Who cares?" Bakugou shouted as he stomped ahead. "I'm getting faster and will surpass Endeavor soon. Then, I'll take them all down." "Kaken, we're inside, and everyone is staring," pleaded Midoriya, sending an apologetic smile to the surrounding sidekicks. "Like I care." Bakugou opened his bedroom door as Midoriya and Todoroki raced to catch up. "Oh, good night, Kaken," Midoriya called out with a big smile. "But your face makes me sick." Bakugou stood there, bewildered by Midoriya's resilience to his insults. "Whatever." He entered his room and slammed the door behind him. Todoroki started to walk to his room a couple of doors down. He turned back towards Midoriya with a kind smile. "Be sure to get a good night's rest, Midoriya." Midoriya smiled and wished Todoroki a restful night. The three turned in for the night just like any other day, fulfilled and excited to push themselves the next day. Each quickly drifted off to sleep, while others schemed throughout the night, preparing for the upcoming day. The next morning was filled with fights and rescues. Midoriya and his friends pushed themselves to catch up to Endeavor. As they discussed the previous night, the city faced several emergencies erupting all at once. This day was the worst they'd ever seen. Even Endeavor was being pushed to his limits. Crimes were being committed, buildings were destroyed across vast areas, and citizens were panicking. The entire team had been assessing the damage from a building collapse when a flash lit the sky as a skyscraper across the city exploded. The top started sliding off as Endeavor jetted away, calling back to the boys, "You finish up here." Todoroki kept falling debris in place with his ice as Bakugou and Midoriya rescued anyone they could find in the building. The deeper they ventured, the more damage they found. Hearing a faint voice, they ran further in. A young woman was lying beneath a pile of rubble, struggling to move. Midoriya quickly pulled what he could off her, while Todoroki froze the ceiling in place. "Don't worry. We'll get you out of here. Does anything hurt, miss?" Midoriya gently asked the woman as he softly touched her hand. The woman looked up at him and smiled. "Oh, Izuku, you're so kind." Midoriya paused and she grabbed his arm, pulling him down to her level. Her face twisted into a smile. "You're so handsome too." "Hands off." Bakugou flew in and separated the two with a burst of energy. Kaken, what if you had hurt her? Idiot, can't you tell she's not a normal civilian? Midoriya looked over at the girl, now standing on top of the rubble, her twisted smile fading away. The entire face melted off, revealing Toga. So, these emergencies really are connected to the League of Villains. Before Midoriya could assess the situation, he and his teammates were surrounded. Among the villains were Toga, Spinner, Dabi, and Compress. Despite Toga's ability to morph into people, she was skilled with a knife. Spinner was comfortable with multiple blades, while Dabi's flames could incinerate several people at once. The young heroes knew they needed to keep watch on the three battle-ready villains. However, although Compress wasn't a fighter, his ability to compress things into a marble-sized object had proven useful in the past. His cunning was the most worrisome issue facing the trio. "We're surrounded," Todoroki calmly stated as the three put their backs together. "I can see that, dumbass," shouted Bakugou, showing off a competitive smirk. "But we can take him." With so many emergencies across the city, the three young heroes had been separated from not only Endeavor but all of his sidekicks as well. They were on their own. Even with Bakugou's confidence and his rare use of the word, we, Midoriya wasn't sure if they could take on these four. "Oh, I can't wait anymore," Toga exclaimed excitedly as she rushed toward the boys, the other three villains following suit. "Izuku, let me drink your blood." Midoriya managed to dodge her attack before Spinner jumped toward him, but Bakugou intercepted Spinner with an explosion. Todoroki was fending off Dabi with his ice, hoping to calm Dabi's flames, but they were too hot. The ice could not keep up. Dabi was a difficult villain to deal with, especially when two of Midoriya's teammates also dealt with fire-type quirks. Spinner mostly attacked with blades instead of a quirk, similar to Toga and her syringes. "Wait," Midoriya thought. "That was only three. Where did Compress go?" He looked around and saw Compress sprinting toward Todoroki. Midoriya put all 20% of One for All into his legs to jump toward Compress and kick him away. To Midoriya's surprise, Compress turned into a dark mud, and before anyone caught on, Midoriya disappeared. Todoroki spun around looking for Midoriya, only to be singed by Dabi's flames and had to back off. Bakugou tried to attack Toga again but was surprised when she turned into dark mud as well, just like Spinner and Dabi. Compress was nowhere to be seen anymore. "Where'd they go?" shouted Bakugou as he punched a wall down. "No, where's Midoriya? Deku?" Bakugou looked around but didn't see him anywhere. "You don't think?" Both Bakugou and Todoroki came to the chilling realization that Midoriya was gone. Midoriya felt cold and wet. Something kept tapping him. Water? His limbs felt restrained. He opened his eyes slowly, coming out of a trance. Twins he'd never seen before stood in the room watching him. Both looked about 12 and had white shoulder-length hair, wearing somewhat dirty white shirts that were fastened like a straitjacket. One wore white briefs while the other wore a white skirt. Otherwise, they looked exactly the same with the same vacant expression. The girl was the first to speak. "He's awake. I'll go inform the others." She left the room while the others stared at Midoriya. "Who are you? Are you with the League of Villains?" Midoriya's eyes spoke volumes of his resistance. With his strength, he could easily get out of his restraints. He was surprised they didn't just eliminate him, knowing he would put up a fight the first chance he got. The door opened, and Shigaraki walked in. Midoriya's arm tensed as his knees shook slightly. This man was scarier than any of them. All he had to do was put his hand on Midoriya, and it would be all over. "Izuku Midoriya. It's been a while. What do you want, Tamura Shigaraki?" Midoriya activated One for All, readying himself to break free. "Calm down. We just want to save you from them." Midoriya paused, confused. The twins walked closer. The boy started addressing Midoriya. "Don't you remember how your classmates at UA treated you?" "What are you talking about?" "They wanted you out of their way." "You don't know what you're talking about." "What about the heroes? Ever since you started hero work, you've seen how selfish they are," the young boy smiled. "Think about all the times you couldn't help people because they pushed you out of the way." What was happening, Midoriya thought. His brain felt heavy. The young girl gently whispered in Midoriya's ear, "Midoriya, I'm so sorry. I know how it feels to be unable to help the innocent people out there. How useless you must feel." Midoriya whipped his head around, surprised he hadn't noticed the girl approaching him. Her face was pure and sweet as she leaned in closer to rest her head on his shoulder. "You've always felt so alone. All you ever wanted was a friend. Right?" Midoriya felt a tear run down his cheek. Midoriya stared at the girl, unable to grasp his own emotions. He thought hard. There were times his classmates showed kindness to him, right? That's what a hero should embody, but something felt wrong. He couldn't remember. Deep in his memory, he could see their faces glaring back at him as he entered the classroom. Shigaraki stepped closer. "Has anyone ever shown you mercy?" Midoriya shot his head up to look at Shigaraki. "If you have no one you can think of, we'd like you to stay with us." Midoriya tried to think harder, further back for someone, anyone who had made him feel good about himself. There was no one. He could only remember Bakugou bullying him. How defenseless he felt. How useless he was. One for all deactivated as Midoriya slumped in his chair in despair. Shigaraki spoke up, telling Twice and the twins that they could show the kid around when he calms down. Midoriya looked up to watch Shigaraki leave as Twice skipped to untie him. "It might be an adjustment, but I think you'll like it with us." Twice let the rope drop as his expressions changed with every sentence he made. "He's going to hate it. He'll be family." Midoriya jumped up, exclaiming, "I refuse to be a villain. I won't hurt people." Sauntering toward Midoriya, Dabi questioned him, "Who decided who were the villains and who were heroes?" "Anyone who hurts the innocent are villains. And aren't the heroes supposed to save the innocents? Tell me, do you remember ever seeing a hero save people for selfless reasons?" Midoriya tried to think. "On TV." He heard the young male twin interrupt him. "You know that doesn't count. The media can easily spin things in favor of the heroes. You've been doing hero work for a while, right? You've seen up close what it's actually like." Deku went silent, unsure of what to say. The young girl in white leaned on Midoriya's arm as she whimpered, "You poor thing. You must feel so lost." Dabi began to walk out of the room, glancing back at Midoriya. "Just think about it." Toga grabbed onto Midoriya, saying she'd gladly give him a tour. Twice complained that it was his job as they skirted Midoriya around the dilapidated building, leaving Dabi behind. Midoriya couldn't focus on anything they said. Confusion and despair clouded his mind. Had he always felt like this? Night fell, and like any normal group, the villains gathered for sleep in the cleanest room in the building. Twice handed Midoriya a blanket and a pillow, even though he planned to sleep on the cold floor. Toga wished him a good night's sleep with a cheerful smile. The twins huddled together on an old, tattered couch. He didn't know where Shigaraki or Dabi were, but the rest showed him unending kindness. Midoriya struggled to process everything. Until he could get a grip on himself, he still hated the villains for hurting people. It seemed best to escape rather than confront them alone. They were in an old factory, dark and damp from years of neglect. Dabi or Shigaraki was likely guarding the ground floor exits. Midoriya could easily create a hole in a wall, but that would alert the villains. If he remembered correctly, there were holes in the roof. Most of the villains were sleeping on the bottom floor to avoid the rain. If he could find a hole in the roof, he could jump out without risking detection. However, he knew the League was clever, which made him wonder why they hadn't tied him up or worse. But overthinking wouldn't help with so little information. Midoriya quietly slipped away from the group sleeping nearby. Once he reached the staircase, he moved cautiously to avoid making noise. The facility was vast, with twists and turns. He sighed with relief when he saw moonlight streaming in from the next floor up. When he got to the top floor, moonlight illuminated a standing figure. Meeting the emotionless eyes of the fire-wielding Dabi, Midoriya froze. "Where do you think you're going?" Dabi asked. "Regardless of what you said earlier, I can't condone what you all have done." "I see. Well, I can't let you leave and expose us either." Midoriya braced himself for an attack, but was taken aback when Dabi continued, "But I don't want to fight you." Dabi stepped closer, putting Midoriya on edge. You've been through the same persecution as the rest of us. Can't you give us a chance? You might see we're not quite what the heroes made us out to be. Behind Midoriya, two figures appeared in the darkness. He spun around as they began to speak. Don't you feel lost? One asked. I know you crave friends, said the other. The pressure behind Midoriya's eyes gave way to tears as Dabi gently patted his head. What do you say, kid? Outside Endeavor's agency, Bakugou erupted in frustration, demanding to know why he couldn't search for Deku. Todoroki remained silent, angry with himself for not stopping Midoriya's kidnapping. Endeavor stared down Bakugou, responding calmly, we need intel before anyone can take action. Todoroki clenched his fists, stepping between them. As much as I hate agreeing with him, he is right, Bakugou. What will you do without knowing their location? I'll burst into every building in and around this city if I have to. For someone who's practically glued to Deku, you don't even care if he's gone. Bakugou shouted. It's not just this city. Even though the warp gate user has been arrested, they could still have a way to teleport themselves long distances. You can't check everywhere. Like hell I can't. Bakugou blasted off into the night sky. Endeavor turned to one of his sidekicks. Keep an eye on him so he doesn't get into trouble. As the fiery woman left, Endeavor looked at his son. Shoto, how are you holding up? Father and son stood in silence until Todoroki finally spoke. Midoriya was my first real friend. His hands trembled as he balled them into fists. Of course I'm worried. He's important to me. Endeavor softened his tone. We'll find him, Shoto. Todoroki turned to his father, eyes blazing. You better hope so, or I'll hold you responsible. Leaving his father on the street, Todoroki entered the agency. Bakugou yelled for the sidekick trailing him to leave him alone, but they refused. He cursed them before using his speed to lose them. He couldn't outrun Endeavor yet, but his lackeys were another matter. He roamed the city, searching for anything, but he knew there was nothing to find. He kicked some rubble left from the fight, frustration boiling inside him. That stupid nerd got himself caught. He's probably crying his eyes out. DMN crybaby. Deku's face flashed in Bakugou's mind. His tears, flushed cheeks, those stupid freckles, that goofy smile. Then another image emerged. Middle school Deku on the ground, scraped and looking up at Bakugou with fear. That's not the Deku now. He's still a mess, but he's stronger. How does All Might's successor get kidnapped? I swear I'm going to beat the daylights out of him when he gets back. As he walked through the rubble where he last saw Deku, memories of a battered Midoriya flooded his mind. His eyes were swollen, both arms broken, calling out to his Kaken, desperate to follow him. Midoriya's trademark in their relationship had always been following Bakugou around, no matter how far or how mean Bakugou was. Bakugou had thought Midoriya's helpfulness stemmed from looking down on him. However, now he understood. Midoriya had always idolized him, as he should, Bakugou thought. Bakugou never needed that nerd's help. Instead, it was his responsibility to watch out for his Deku. He had squandered that responsibility for too long, being Midoriya's primary bully for years. Even so, Midoriya still smiled at him, still followed him, and still tried to protect him. Midoriya tried his best at everything he did, including everything for Bakugou. He'd be doing his best to survive, but would that be enough? I can't just stand here. Bakugou blasted off into the night, clenching his hands through the explosions and fighting the tears in the corners of his eyes. Fire and ice raged throughout the obstacles in the Endeavor Agency's gym. Most of the other members had long left. The few stragglers eyed the dual quirk user from the safer corners of the gym, debating whether they should leave him be. Midoriya, his best friend, was gone. That fluffy hair looked so soft that Todoroki found himself wanting to touch it, but he kept his distance, fearing it was too weird for the sweet boy to handle. Suddenly he regretted that decision. Todoroki had never had friends before Midoriya. His life was filled solely with hatred and revenge, but ever since the sports festival he found he enjoyed life more. His classmates filled his once empty life with color and excitement. As the sweat ran down his entire body, Todoroki remembered Midoriya's words to him during the sports festival. It's your quirk. Not his. The fire teetered before it exploded in Todoroki's face. He dropped down, breathing haphazardly. It was his fault, he thought. He offered this internship to Midoriya. If Midoriya wasn't with a failure like him, maybe he would have been safe. Bakugou's earlier words pulsated through his mind. Of course, I care. Midoriya's smile, his entire being, gave Todoroki overwhelming comfort. But I can't do anything myself right now. When they fought Stain, they had each other's backs. I could help. Then that Nomu swept him away. This pit in my stomach happened then too. But I'll come for you the second we have a lead, Midoriya. I promise. Holding his hands to his face, he whispered to himself, and we'll fight together again. Just stay alive until then. Midoriya decided to give the villains a chance by staying with them a bit longer. Surprisingly, everyone seemed to like him being there in their own ways. Toga stuck to him a lot and kept asking to let her drink his blood. Dabi's primary role was to keep her from doing such things. Occasionally, Midoriya would find Dabi looking at him before giving him a snack. Dabi reminded Midoriya of a protective figure, always looking out for him. The twins, Yuya and Yuta, checked up on him daily to make sure he was feeling okay. One helped him work through his bad memories, while the other lent emotional support. Twice was incredibly nice, though a bit eccentric. He felt like he thought of everyone like family and was even more energetic than Ida. The twins leaned on Midoriya on either side with sweet smiles on their faces. Midoriya smiled back happily, thinking how adorable they were. It had only been a week, but he was starting to care for each of them, even Shigaraki, as he saw how Shigaraki protected everyone. They really were like a family. Once the twins were asleep, Midoriya gently laid them down and covered them with a blanket. As he left the room to let them sleep, a sudden voice startled him. You seem to be getting comfortable. Dabi! Midoriya held his chest, hoping to keep his heart in place. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. As always, the slender, patchwork individual showed no emotion, reaching out to pet Midoriya's hair. It's fine, conceded Midoriya as he snuggled into Dabi's hand. So, what are your thoughts about staying here? If it weren't for the bad things you guys do, Midoriya looked over to the sleeping twins as he continued, you guys seem like a really good family. A family, huh? I've never had one, so I can't comment. You've never had a family? Not the typical kind. Then what was yours like? That's a bit personal, don't you think? Oh, I didn't mean to, it's fine. Silence filled the room until Midoriya couldn't take it anymore. You know, if your family wasn't the best before, it's okay to think of your friends as family. I mean, Twice really seems to take everyone here as family, so you could too. Dabi patted Midoriya on the head. Make sure to eat something before you go to bed. Dabi walked off without another word. Midoriya watched as Dabi walked away, thinking, this is the kindest anyone has ever treated me. But I can't condone their actions, can I? More innocent people could die. What should I do? Dabi, Shigaraki called Dabi over to an isolated room in the facility. The twins' quirks are working well, but that kid is still resisting. He needs something more to keep him here. What do you have in mind? Show him more attention. Dabi tilted his head in confusion. Shigaraki smiled as he explained, Toga sticks to him, but he doesn't take the bait. Instead, his focus is usually on you. Get it? Dabi averted his eyes from Shigaraki, sighing. Do you hear yourself? You make it sound like the kid is infatuated with me. Maybe he's not, but he is certainly attached to you. Shigaraki patted Dabi's shoulder with one finger not connecting. Don't let us down. And if he doesn't fall for it? Then kill him before he escapes. Footsteps echoed down the hallway as Shigaraki departed. Dabi stayed put, listening to the silence and contemplating what he needed to accomplish when Midoriya walked in, looking around. There you are. Twice just returned with more ramen. We can eat whenever. Midoriya's body was pulled forward so suddenly that he didn't comprehend what was happening. He looked up at Dabi and, for the first time since they met, saw a smile on Dabi's face. Thank you for letting me know, Izuku. The usual emotionless expression had softened into something warmer. Transfixed by Dabi's appealing blue eyes, Midoriya didn't move or respond. Izuku! Toga called from the other room, snapping Midoriya back to reality. He pushed himself away from Dabi and scurried towards the door. Why, you're welcome, Dabi. I have to go. Toga is calling me. Midoriya stumbled as he exited the room, calling out, I'm coming, Toga. Oh, I like the sound of that. Toga squealed in excitement. Dabi looked down at his hand, a smile spreading across his face. This will be fun. Midoriya thought, is it just me or is Dabi more touchy than he used to be? What has gotten into him? It's been a week since he hugged me, and it seems like every chance he gets he touches me somehow. He recalled the previous night when he, Twice, and Spinner were playing cards. Midoriya had his back against the old couch when Dabi sat down directly behind him, resting his hands and chin on Midoriya's head, his legs on either side of the flustered hero. Midoriya felt his heart flutter, losing focus on the game. As Midoriya was trying to decide whether to fold in poker, Dabi leaned down and whispered in his ear, Go all in, Izuku. Just recalling this sent shivers up his spine. His skin burned and tingled in a way he couldn't describe. What are you doing? Dabi asked. Midoriya jumped and frantically waved his hands as he spun around. Nothing. I think I've just got a bit of heartburn. You know, from all the sodium in the ramen and stuff. Dabi ruffled Midoriya's hair before sliding his hand down to cup Midoriya's cheek. Sorry. I'll try to arrange for you to eat a proper meal soon. That feeling again, but this time it was warm too. Midoriya thought this was the first time he felt this happy. Secretly, he hoped Dabi wouldn't pull his hand away. He looked away as he felt his face burning. The hand cupping his face moved to his chin, holding him in place. Then he felt soft lips touch his cheek. Dabi pulled away with a smirk. Well, why? You're smart. Think it over. Dabi stood and left Midoriya with his racing thoughts. Confusion riddled the timid boy. Not only were Dabi's actions odd, but so were his own. His heart ached. His stomach churned. The thought occurred to him that Dabi might have feelings for him. Midoriya shook his head. That's not even possible. Dabi's personality is tough and dark. Someone like Dabi would never see a timid boy like Midoriya as a romantic interest. Instead of focusing on Dabi, Midoriya needed to make an important decision. Did he want to stay with the villains? If he did, was it worth accepting his fate to become one of them? Would he be able to live knowing he'd be going against every moral he had? Later that night, sleep was elusive. Tossing and turning would be normal for anyone sleeping on the floor, but Midoriya knew that wasn't the reason for his insomnia. Invasive snoring could be heard from the nearby villains, Spinner being the primary culprit. Midoriya turned to his other side in hopes of blocking the noise somewhat. When he looked to the doorway, he saw dark boots facing him. Midoriya whipped his head up to see Dabi. With a single finger, Dabi motioned for Midoriya to follow. Careful not to wake the others, Midoriya climbed to his bare feet and tiptoed out of the room. Several minutes passed before either spoke. Dabi stopped on the top floor of the factory, and translucent moonlight filtered into the room. Midoriya followed Dabi purely out of instinct and curiosity. Izuku, Dabi said, never looking back. Have you made a decision yet? Will you stay? Midoriya looked down at his fidgeting hands as he mumbled an answer. Well, I really like you guys. You're a lot nicer than I realized before, and you've all been looking out for me. It's hard to figure out what the right thing to do is. The boy froze as he looked up to realize Dabi was staring intensely at him. Are you sure you wouldn't regret leaving? Well, Dabi silenced him by pulling his face closer. Midoriya felt Dabi's warmth as he wrapped an arm around Midoriya's waist, closing the space between them. His panicked eyes spun as he tried to make sense of the situation. Would you regret leaving me? Before Midoriya could answer, Dabi filled the emptiness between their lips. Shock overwhelmed him as he froze once again. Dabi smirked as he leaned closer to Midoriya, who felt frozen, unable to process what was happening. Dabi pressed his body against Midoriya, teasingly exploring his lips. Despite the chill in the air, the tension between them created a warmth that was undeniable. Dabi's gaze was intense as he held Midoriya's face, drawing him in closer. Do you want to escape? Dabi asked, his voice low and challenging. Why did you? Midoriya stammered, flustered. Kiss me, I thought it would be obvious, Dabi replied, shifting to whisper in Midoriya's ear, sending a shiver down his spine. But I'm just a dork and weak and shy, Midoriya protested, but his words faltered as Dabi's breath tickled his ear. Maybe that's what makes you so attractive, Dabi teased. Attractive? Midoriya exclaimed, taken aback. Just try to escape if you want, but now that I want you, Dabi said, his eyes narrowing as he locked onto Midoriya's gaze, no, you won't get far. The agency door slammed as Bakugou stormed out of the meeting hall, frustration boiling over. A sidekick hurried after him, attempting to reason with him. Bakugou, please understand. I thought this was the #1 heroes agency. It's been a month with no progress. You're all useless. Bakugou shouted. It'll take time to find Midoriya. We couldn't locate the League of Villains before. It's unreasonable to expect us to find them just because they have a hostage now. It only took 3 days to find them when they had me. What's different now? They're likely taking extra precautions after being discovered last time. If they didn't harm him immediately, he should still be alive, the sidekick reassured, but Bakugou pushed him away. Shut up. While you all sit around, what do you think is happening to Deku? Bakugou, Endeavor entered, his expression serious. You'll never become a true hero if you can't control your emotions. Bakugou clenched his fists, unable to argue. Take the day off, Bakugou. Screw you. Sparks flickered from his palms as he glared at the hero. I'll save Deku on my own. With that, Bakugou burst through a window and disappeared into the city. Should I follow him, sir? The sidekick asked. Don't bother. We need to focus on more important matters. Endeavor returned to the meeting room. Todoroki, watching from the window, felt the weight of frustration and worry. He wanted to help but felt powerless. Prepare to go on patrol, Shoto. Right. Todoroki followed his father out, his mind clouded with the fear that Midoriya might be lost forever. The thought numbed him. Losing friends was part of being a hero, but could he have done something to prevent Midoriya's kidnapping? As they patrolled, responding to various emergencies, hope flickered when a hero approached Endeavor. Endeavor, we believe we've found the League of Villains hideout. Todoroki's eyes widened. Where is it? Hold on, Shoto. We can't rush in unprepared, Endeavor cautioned. I won't let him suffer alone anymore. Todoroki insisted. Meanwhile, Bakugou navigated the city, determination fueling him. He slowed, realizing they might not be nearby, but he refused to give up. He spotted Todoroki and Endeavor rushing away, and desperation filled him. They must have found Deku. Explosions erupted behind him as he sped toward the heroes. He caught sight of a factory on the outskirts of the city, long abandoned. Before they could reach the perimeter, a gas line ruptured, igniting a series of explosions. Through the flames, a figure emerged, and Bakugou's heart raced. Arg! It's so hot. I hate sweating. Toga complained, wiping her brow. Shut it, Dabi snapped. You can blame our uninvited guests for your discomfort, Toga, Shigaraki hissed. Hey! Stop your quarreling and tell us where the young hero you kidnapped is. Endeavor commanded. Kidnapped? Shigaraki replied, a smirk forming on his lips. Ha! Don't worry. He's here. A timid boy with fluffy green hair stepped out from behind Dabi, avoiding eye contact with the heroes. He wore a dark green hoodie and ripped black jeans, his hands buried deep in his pockets. Dark circles marked his face, and he appeared somewhat compliant. Todoroki approached cautiously, asking, Midoriya, are you okay? Midoriya finally looked up, meeting Todoroki's concerned gaze. Confusion filled his heart as he nodded and replied, I'm fine. Todoroki sighed in relief until Midoriya added, Why are you here? We're here to get you back, Midoriya. I don't want to go back. What? You stupid nerd. Bakugou burst onto the scene. What the hell is wrong with you? I came to save you, and that's what you have to say. Kaken. Deku smiled, a hint of defiance in his expression. You never change. What is that supposed to mean? You're the true villain here. You're asking for a beating, Deku. Bakugou lunged to grab Midoriya, but Dabi's flames pushed him back effortlessly. Shigaraki called out, "You heard it from the boy himself. It's time you all leave him alone. He's sick of the way you do things. So, we'll be leaving." Spears of ice erupted from the ground, separating the group of villains as Todoroki exclaimed, "I don't think so. You're too weak, Shoto Todoroki." Dabi grinned down at him from atop the largest spear. "In this heat, you can't expect to defeat us with ice." Midoriya rested in Dabi's arms, while Todoroki and Bakugou felt their anger rising as Endeavor instructed his sidekicks to surround the building and block the villain's path. Toga called out from behind the ice, "Let's go, Izuku." Right." Midoriya attempted to climb out of Dabi's arms to follow Toga but was pulled back when Bakugou and Todoroki jumped towards them. Instinctively, Midoriya raised his hands towards his classmates, shooting a gust of air pressure to stop them. Pain shot through his body as he gasped. In an instant, Endeavor had the boys over his shoulders. "Put me down, Yuja." Bakugou struggled until his feet hit the ground. Todoroki, however, was too shocked by Midoriya's actions to process anything else. The look in Midoriya's eyes told him everything. Midoriya despised them. He glanced up at Midoriya as Dabi set him down. As the villain group gathered and moved deeper into the flames, several heroes jumped in from all sides. Each hero was struck by a black WHP, spun in the air, and slammed to the ground. Midoriya doubled over, blood spilling from his mouth. Midoriya / Deku. Todoroki and Bakugou shouted, trying to push forward. Midoriya snapped his head towards them, declaring, "I won't let you hurt them." Dabi extended his flames towards the boys, pushing them back before picking Midoriya up again. They turned and vanished through the flames, which were so intense that even Endeavor could not follow. The heroes regrouped after the villains disappeared, finding no traces left behind. Those still conscious searched for an escape route, while the rest of the sidekicks received treatment for burns and injuries from Midoriya's Black Whip. Todoroki and Bakugou remained frozen, replaying the last half hour in their minds. Finally, Todoroki whispered, "What just happened?" This snapped Bakugou out of his trance. He punched a wall with one of his explosions, sending debris flying. A sidekick reprimanded him, warning that he could have caused more fires. Bakugou remained silent. Deku had never complained about how he spoke to him before. The only time Deku had fought back was after the provisional exam. He had always been there since they were kids, accepting Bakugou for who he was. But today, Deku had shown just how much he truly hated Bakugou. "Deku. We need reinforcements, especially now that the factory is gone. I think it's time to bring in that monster Kurogyari spoke about." "What a drag." "I'll pass," Dabi replied, uninterested. Twice appeared next to Dabi, waving his hands as he rambled, "That's not how to be a team player, Dabi. This mission is serious. This monster could help us. Back off." Dabi conjured ball of fire around him to push Twice away. "It's too much work." Shigaraki pointed to Midoriya. "Then watch over Izuku. We will join you later tonight." "Whatever." Midoriya glanced at Dabi from the corner of his eye, trying to gauge the man's feelings about his new task. Unable to read him, he turned back to the group as they began to leave. Toga waved goodbye, assuring him she'd come back, and he shyly waved back. Midoriya looked up at Dabi. "So where should we go?" "Don't know. I just don't want to deal with that monster." Dabi replied, bored. Midoriya felt uncertain as they stood in silence. Sensing his apprehension, Dabi pulled him along by the back of his head. "Dabi, where are we going? You ask a lot of questions." "Sorry." "Don't worry about it." Before long, they arrived at a bar. Midoriya halted as Dabi opened the door. "But I'm underage. You don't have to drink. I told you I'd arrange for you to eat a proper meal, remember? This is one of the few places we can go to get food and stay out of sight." As Midoriya entered, he noticed a few shady characters scattered throughout the bar. No one made a move, but they all kept their eyes on Dabi and Midoriya. Dabi didn't seem to care. He ordered their food, a glass of whiskey for himself, and then sat down, propping his feet up on the table. Don't you feel like people are staring?" Midoriya asked. "They know not to bother us. Just eat your food when it gets here like those other people don't exist. As Midoriya went to respond, a plate of steak and vegetables was placed in front of him. He could feel himself salivating at the sight. Just eat it already. At Dabi's words, Midoriya dug in excitedly. It had been over a month since he'd had a real meal, and even longer since he had steak. Dabi watched as Midoriya eagerly devoured his food. Once Midoriya calmed down, he could feel Dabi's eyes on him. Is something wrong? Midoriya asked, looking up from his food. No. I'm just wondering, after all you've been through, how do you keep up that sense of justice? Twice is pretty upbeat and protective too, don't you think? He's his own kind of messed up. You, on the other hand, seem to hold on to your ideals. You even care about the people who hurt you. Right. Midoriya didn't know how to respond and started eating again to buy some time to think. Like those classmates. That's why you held back, Dabi accused, placing his glass on the table. Midoriya paused. For some reason, he couldn't look at Dabi as he answered, that even though they used to treat me like that, they still came looking for me. A knot formed in Midoriya's stomach. There was shame in caring for people who had used him. He knew this, but he couldn't help himself. You need to wrap your head around the fact that those people had ulterior motives. It'd be bad publicity if they didn't bother trying to save you. Midoriya knew Dabi was right. He had let Bakugou torment him since they were kids, without ever fighting back. Even so, he still cared and wanted to be friends with him. The same could be said about the rest of his classmates. Dabi watched as Midoriya fought with himself internally, letting some thoughts slip out loud along the way. But then again, maybe that's a part of you that makes you so adorable. Midoriya tried to hide his blushing face. No matter how many times Dabi said such things, it still made Midoriya's heart flutter. Dabi kept an eye on Midoriya over the rim of his drinking glass as he thought back on what Shigaraki told him after the escape. Now that Izuku has decided to stay with us, I think it's time to test his resolve. While we're recovering our strength, we need to put Izuku in situations where he'll have to attack the heroes. He'll either get used to it and become a true member of the League or he'll falter. In which case, we'll have to reconsider his position. Since most of the League had gone off somewhere, maybe it was time to test Midoriya. The League would need supplies. That could be a good way to start the boy off on helping the League. However, he thought, I should wait until the twins join us. That's fine. He had some ideas of how they could pass the time. A grin formed across Dabi's face. Once Midoriya finished his food, Dabi grabbed his wrist, pulling him along. He led Midoriya upstairs to a dark apartment. Midoriya looked at Dabi, confused. We'll be staying here. I persuaded the owner to let us use this room for a while. Persuaded, Midoriya thought, in other words, he was threatened, right? Lost in thought, Midoriya didn't notice Dabi reaching for him. The world flipped on its side as Midoriya was pushed onto the bed, his wrists held tightly by Dabi's hands. Dabi! Midoriya exclaimed as Dabi leaned down on top of him. Those twerps will be joining us later. This is our best opportunity to have some fun. Fun. Dabi leaned closer, his breath warm against Midoriya's ear. The same tingly feeling he'd felt before spread throughout his skin, intensifying wherever Dabi touched him. Midoriya frantically tried to talk his way out of the situation by listing all the reasons they shouldn't be doing this. The moment Dabi started undoing Midoriya's breathes, Midoriya grabbed Dabi's hands. Dabi, we can't? Dabi's excitement only grew as he pushed forward. Sure we can. It should be a few more hours before those brats get here. No, I've never. Dabi figured as much, but he knew he couldn't do something that would make Midoriya rethink staying with the League. Dabi rolled over next to Midoriya, letting out a long sigh. Fine. I get it. Midoriya exhaled a breath of relief, which annoyed Dabi greatly. He sat up, obviously unable to look at Dabi. Dabi thought he should have seen that one coming. What he didn't expect was a shy voice mumbling, "Why no? I wouldn't mind doing the stuff that leads up to that." That was all it took for Dabi to pull Midoriya down onto him. "It's your turn. I want to see you take the initiative this time," whispered Dabi, teasingly smiling at Midoriya. "Come on. Get to it." Midoriya wasn't sure what to do, and his muscles tensed so much his movements became mechanical. Dabi pointed to his lips, giving a hint to the oblivious Midoriya. Midoriya leaned down and gave a quick kiss on Dabi's lips. "You can do better than that." Dabi gently grabbed Midoriya's face with both hands, pulling him closer and surprising him with a deeper kiss. Between breaths, Dabi instructed Midoriya, "Feel your way around," as he guided Midoriya's hand underneath his shirt. Midoriya's heart raced with excitement as he noticed the panic and embarrassment wash over him. "Now, try this," Dabi said, pulling Midoriya's head down to his neck. Hesitant, Midoriya began to kiss lightly on Dabi's neck. "You're not quite getting it," Dabi teased, lifting Midoriya's chin. "Let me show you." He kissed Midoriya's neck, his lips grazing the tender skin, sending a jolt of electricity through Midoriya. Dabi continued to leave gentle marks on Midoriya's neck while his hand moved down Midoriya's back. Suddenly, the bedroom door swung open, startling them both. "What are you doing?" asked Yuya, peering into the room. Yuta followed, eyes widening at the sight. Midoriya jumped to the other side of the bed, stammering out panicked explanations. Dabi rubbed his face in frustration. "Perfect timing, you guys." Yuta approached as Yuya crawled onto the bed next to Midoriya. "Yeah, whatever. Just don't let Toga see you like this. Shigaraki sent us back since they'll be gone for a while." "What's keeping them?" Midoriya asked. "Seems they have to fight that big monster. We couldn't help much, so Shigaraki sent us back to let you know what needs to be done." Dabi's demeanor shifted as he sat up, addressing the twins. "Fine. Then spill." A warm feeling enveloped Midoriya as he relaxed into Dabi's hand, stroking his hair. His heart sank when Dabi's hand pulled away. "You three know what to do. I need to go meet a potential recruit. Try to stay out of sight while you're out." "Right." Without another word, Dabi exited the bar, leaving Midoriya and the twins behind. This was the first time Midoriya wouldn't see Dabi since joining the villains, but he reassured himself that Dabi would return at night or in the morning. Yuya and Yuta tugged on Midoriya's sleeves. "We need to go too." "Yeah, we need to check out the location before we go in tonight." Midoriya nodded, smiling at the twins as they led him through the back alleys, avoiding the main streets. Upon arriving at the warehouse, Midoriya knelt down to their level. "Okay, now that we're here, I want to make something clear. If anything dangerous happens, don't instigate anything. I'll protect both of you. Got it?" The twins nodded, prompting a smile from Midoriya. He couldn't understand how such sweet kids were part of the League. Judging by their clothes, he suspected they had been in solitary confinement at a psych ward. Yet, they seemed well-adjusted and intelligent. Most villains were open about their pasts, except for Dabi, Shigaraki, and the twins. Midoriya didn't know much about their motivations, but now wasn't the time to dwell on that. This warehouse contained food and supplies for a popular department store. If they could find an entry point and wait for the employees to leave, they could take what they needed without being detected. The three of them positioned themselves on the roof of the facility, watching as the employees finished for the day. The perfect entrance was a skylight. Midoriya worried about security, but if they could be quick, it should be fine. Using one for all, they jumped down safely. "Okay, you two gather snacks and lightweight items. I'll grab water cases." As they separated, Midoriya realized his body felt different using his quirk. When he had used it against Endeavor's group, he had felt pain, but now he felt fine. Was it because he was attacking heroes? The people who made up One for All were heroes, and perhaps they were displeased with his choices. Midoriya's thoughts were interrupted when he spotted soba. Todoroki liked this brand, he recalled, and preferred it cold. He chuckled, imagining Todoroki quietly enjoying his meal. The warmth filled Midoriya's chest at the thought of sharing a meal again. Suddenly, he dropped the soba package. The twins rushed over, dropping bags of chips and candy along the way. Yuya looked up at him with concern. "Are you okay?" "Yeah. My head just hurts." "All of a sudden?" Yuta asked, glancing at the soba package on the floor before looking back at Midoriya. "Yeah, it's probably just all the dust in here or something like that." Yuya hugged Midoriya as she spoke. "It'll be okay. As long as we're together, we'll help you get better." "Yeah. If you focus on us and the mission, maybe you'll forget your headache. Midoriya smiled. These kids were cute and so sweet. In fact, maybe their concern was enough to help him, he thought, as the drumming in his head began to settle down. You're right. You can pick that stuff back up and I'll grab the water now. What do you think you're doing, Deku? Midoriya looked up in the direction of the voice. Bakugou glared down at the three from atop a stack of crates. A moment later, Todoroki slid down a slide of ice to the floor, his normally stoic expression replaced with something Midoriya could only call somber. Midoriya. Todoroki and Bakugou spent the following days patrolling through the now mostly calm city, looking for anything to distract them. Todoroki was often in his own head, but he still noticed how quiet Bakugou was. The normally hot-headed hero barely said a word to anyone after that day. Bakugou, what was your relationship like with Midoriya? What kind of question is that? Shouted Bakugou, his frustration evident. You know, what were you guys like in middle school? Bakugou paused, then stomped past Todoroki with a slight blush on his face. What did you think I meant? Nothing. Okay, so are you going to answer my question? He was a coward, a weirdo, and a nerd. The only thing that's changed is he's stronger now. That's rude to say, Bakugou. You asked. It's just, Midoriya seemed really angry with you. He called you a villain. I know. Shut up. Todoroki stopped when he saw Bakugou freeze. The next moment, Bakugou shot up into the air and atop the buildings. Todoroki quickly tried to follow, unsure of what was happening. Once he finally caught up, he found Bakugou looking down into an open skylight of a warehouse. Knowing Bakugou wouldn't respond well to him, he simply looked into the warehouse to see what Bakugou was so interested in. His breath caught in his throat at the sight of the ever-familiar green hair several feet below. Two children ran up to Midoriya, clinging to him. It's Midoriya! At Todoroki's voice, Bakugou jumped through the skylight. Todoroki tried to grab him but was met only with empty air. They had been too rash when they tried to take him back last time. They should have gotten reinforcements. He knew that, but it looked like Midoriya was basically alone, only two kids by his side. This might have been their best shot. Against his better judgment, Todoroki created a path of ice to slide down to his friends. Midoriya. Immediately, Midoriya grounded himself, shouting back to the twins, Go! Hide. I'll take care of these two. He didn't know how he would protect the kids against the two best fighters in his class, but he knew he had no choice. He pushed forward, only to be met with a wall of ice between him and Todoroki. Midoriya. We don't want to fight you. Like hell I don't, screamed Bakugou as he punched the floor where Midoriya had just been. Midoriya regained his posture as he landed on nearby crates, brows knitted together in anger. He blocked Bakugou's next right hook before kicking Bakugou across the warehouse. Todoroki ran over to check on Bakugou. That looked like it hurt, Kaken. Blood ran down Midoriya's chin. Todoroki and Bakugou froze when they saw the intense look on Midoriya's face. To them, he truly looked like a villain. Todoroki spotted the twins peeking out from behind shelves in the back. Bakugou, the kids, whispered Todoroki. Bakugou's blood boiled as he saw the smirk on Midoriya's face. He snapped out of it when Todoroki pushed him out of the way right before ice shattered everywhere. Midoriya smiled at the crater he created. You should be paying attention to me, Kaken, or you might not wake up again. Why are you doing this, Deku? You should know. Midoriya's eyes glazed over as his demeanor tensed. His muscles flexed as he turned towards his childhood friend. Everyone treats me like trash, but you see nothing but someone who should. How'd you say it? Someone who should do the world a favor and take a nosedive off the roof. Bakugou clenched his teeth as he sat in a pile of debris. He thought this was behind them. After their fight, they didn't try to get closer, but he thought that things were better, that everything was cleared up. So then was it a lie? That you wanted to be friends, Deku? What? You said All Might was your hero, but that I was the one actually in your life. You said you looked up to me, that you didn't want to be enemies. Pounding in Midoriya's head nearly brought him to his knees. He gripped at his head as he tried to steady himself. Had he said that to Bakugou? He remembered their fight, but nothing came of it. Everyone still treated him like a nuisance. Midoriya heard the twins calling out and turned to look at them, seeing them pointing somewhere in front of him. He slammed into the ground. When he opened his eyes, Bakugou had him pinned. The Deku I know had a stubborn sense of justice. He'd never become a villain, so why? Bakugou only stopped his assault when he caught a glimpse of a dark mark on Midoriya's neck. Kaken dash! Screams pierced Midoriya's ears. He twisted as best he could under Bakugou to look for the twins. Todoroki had them by the collars of their shirts, keeping them in place by freezing their shoes to the ground. Blood rushed to Midoriya's head as he used one for all to knock Bakugou off him and jumped towards Todoroki at full blast. In an instant he was in front of Todoroki, fist held back, ready to strike. He felt the chill of the ice as it made contact. Todoroki struggled to rise from where he fell, the ice cracking off his face, but he fell back down. He would be down for a while, but Midoriya couldn't concentrate on that. His insides boiled as he tasted blood and bile rush up his throat. He released everything when he fell to his knees. Yuya cried to him, asking if he was all right. He knew Bakugou was rushing to them, so there was no time to answer. He pulled the twins out of their shoes before using his quirk to jump out of Bakugou's path, up the walls, and out of the first window he reached. Bakugou started to follow but then remembered his teammate. Todoroki lay motionless not far from him. His face was already swelling. From the look of it, some of his ribs might have also been broken, but luckily the half-and-half's ice seemed to have protected him. He couldn't follow his childhood friend like this. Once again he failed to get Deku back. Dabi returned to the bar apartment right before sunrise, anxious to hear the twins' report on the supply mission. His eyes narrowed when he saw the expressions of the two children waiting for him at the top of the stairs. Yuta fidgeted with the bottom of his shirt while Yuya looked like she had been crying. What happened? Yuya sniffled as she tried not to cry. Midoriya is hurt. Dabi rushed up the stairs and swung the door open. Red splattered across the bed sheets surrounding the huddled figure in the middle of the bed. Midoriya looked up to see Dabi. I'm sorry. I failed the mission, sobbed Midoriya, trying to hide his face. Where are you hurt? I'm not hurt. Then why is there blood everywhere? Oh, I'm sorry. I messed up the sheets. Izuku, answer me. What happened? Todoroki and Kaken found us before we got out of the warehouse. It seems like every time I fight against them, my body hurts inside. How so? I feel my stomach boiling, and the more I use it like that, the more the pain spreads. I start spitting up blood. Dabi sat on the side of the bed, thinking about what he needed to do. The last time Midoriya coughed up blood, he healed on his own without much fuss, but this was a lot of blood. They couldn't go to a doctor. If he got rest like last time, maybe he would heal the same way. Dabi, I'm fine. I just need rest. I'll do better next time, whimpered Midoriya. Dabi looked over his shoulder at the boy lying down behind him. Next time, huh? He's still willing to put his body at risk to help us. That wasn't surprising to Dabi after seeing how Midoriya fought in the sports festival. This guy was willing to tear himself to pieces if it meant accomplishing his goals. There won't be another mission. What? But Midoriya tried to sit up, but Dabi pushed him back down. No more. So then, what am I supposed to do? I don't have anywhere to go back to anymore. No one will want me without my quirk. I'll talk to Shigaraki. Midoriya stared at Dabi, not sure why he was willing to put his neck on the line for him. I'll suggest you be used as a last line of defense. You'll reserve your energy until an emergency situation. Yuya crawled onto the bed with a big smile on her face. That's great. You can stay with us without getting hurt. Yuta walked up to the side of the bed, nodding in agreement. Midoriya felt tears stinging his eyes. He threw his arm over his eyes, trying desperately not to sob. They wanted him to be with them with or without being useful. His heart felt full for the first time in his life. Dabi swiped away some tears, making Midoriya look over to him. Get some rest. When Midoriya woke up a few hours later, he found the room glowing from light peeking through the curtains. He found the twins cuddled up to him in the bed despite the blood still staining the sheets. Careful not to wake them, he moved his head to look for Dabi. In a dark corner of the room, Dabi sat on the floor, his head tilted to the side as he slept. Midoriya stared at the sleeping man, captivated by the sight. This man was the first person to ever make him feel so content. He didn't have to be or do anything special, and Dabi would stay with him. Everyone in the league treated him like family in their own ways. Was it really okay to stay with them? Would nothing change, even though he wouldn't be any different than his old quirkless self? Dabi's eyes opened, startling Midoriya. Dabi raised his head to look directly at Midoriya. "How are you feeling?" "I'm feeling much better." "Good." Dabi rose from the floor, grabbing his coat off the dining chair. "Are you going somewhere?" "I need to meet that potential recruit again." "Is that recruit special or something?" Dabi grinned, walking over to the bed. He leaned over the bed, letting his nose nearly touch Midoriya's. "Are you curious about my business?" This person must be someone important if you keep going to meet them, right?" Dabi chuckled at the shy response. He straightened up and turned to leave. "Just rest today. Make the others get you food from downstairs." The door shut gently, but Midoriya could still feel the pounding in his heart. His heart nearly jumped out of his chest when Yuta suddenly sat up. "That guy is a real creep." "Why, Yuta? I didn't realize you were awake." "Who could sleep when some creepy guy is invading your space?" "I'm sorry we woke you." Yuya crawled onto Midoriya's chest as she happily spoke. "Izuku, are you gay?" "Yuya, you shouldn't just ask someone that." "But I want to know." She whined into Midoriya's red face. He didn't know how they even knew about such things or if he should answer. "I think I probably am." "Yeah." "HM. Well, good." "Good." "Yeah. 'Cause that means what we walked in on was mutual, right?" Midoriya had completely forgotten about that scene and jumped up in embarrassment. Yuya rolled off the bed, and Yuta just sat next to Midoriya, startled. Before he could apologize to Yuya, he felt himself gagging again. "Don't get up. You still need rest." "Yeah." "Lay back down. We'll get you something easy to eat." The pitter-patter of little feet echoed through the room as the twins ran out towards the stairs. Midoriya finally caught his breath and wiped the blood on the sheets. A sigh left his lips as he laid back down. A lot had happened in just a few days. He remembered the feeling of Dabi's presence and the warmth it brought. Heat engulfed his body. He knew he needed to stop thinking about it, but all he could think was that he missed Dabi. Bakugou sat next to Todoroki's bed. He'd just received a long lecture from Endeavor himself. It would be an understatement to say he was mad his son was in such a poor state. Todoroki groaned and winced as he tried to move. "Oi, you awake, half and half?" "Bakugou? What are you doing here?" "No reason." "What happened with Midoriya?" "He got away." Todoroki gripped the sheets, anguish covering his face. Bakugou finally got the nerve to ask, "You got to ask me about Midoriya before. It's your turn. What's your relationship with him?" "What do you mean?" "You've seen we're friends." "Right." Bakugou lowered his head as he scratched his head. "You didn't tell me much about Midoriya from middle school. In the warehouse, he said that you—" "Shut up. That was a long time ago." "So it was the truth." "I wasn't sure after hearing what he said about everyone else." "What? You don't remember?" "He said everyone treated him poorly." "We know that's not true, and it doesn't sound like Midoriya to talk like that either." "So he is under the influence of someone's quirk." "I think so. And I think it might be those kids. We know firsthand from our license exam that kids can have crazy powerful quirks, and when I snuck up on them, the look in their eyes wasn't fear. They looked confident and angry. When we saw you pin down Midoriya, they started screaming for him to help them, trying to make him think I was hurting them. So they're cunning little brats." "Did you get any information from Midoriya?" "He did seem confused. I told him about something he said to me a while back, and he didn't remember." "And?" Bakugou looked to the floor. He didn't know if he should say what he saw. "I think I saw marks on his neck." Todoroki tried to get up, but his ribs refused his movement. "Marks? Ow." Bakugou stared at Todoroki. He knew what the look in his eyes meant, and it made his heart drop. He couldn't bring himself to ask Todoroki what his true feelings were towards Deku. If he asked, It'd only make Todoroki suspicious. Yeah. So I think someone in the villain group is. He couldn't say it out loud, but they both knew. With that, their conversation died out. There was no way they'd luck out to find Midoriya so quickly again. They wanted him back before anything worse happened to that cheerful little hero. Cheers echoed through the room as the League stood atop a tall stage, hundreds of followers below. Midoriya stood next to Dabi and Shigaraki as they took in the praise below. Shigaraki was seriously wounded but happier than he'd ever been before. The rest of the group was worse for wear as well, though their enthusiasm hit it well. During the past 6 months, Midoriya's main task was to babysit the twins, but during that time, the rest of the League overthrew the meta liberation. Midoriya knew he'd always feel conflicted about the League gaining power and the potential for innocents becoming victims, but he found that wasn't what he was most worried about. During the battle with the liberation, he couldn't help anyone. Dabi had ordered him to stay with the twins. The liberation was the enemy and not heroes. Midoriya thought it was the perfect chance for him to feel useful to his new family. He was asked to join them on stage but didn't feel deserving of the honor. Once the gathering had ended, the members of their new force started to mingle and disperse. Midoriya walked through the crowded halls. He heard from Dabi that even heroes were joining their forces, but he was surprised by how many. Then one hero caught his eye. Hawks, the current number 2 hero. No surprise who was with him, but it made Midoriya's heart ache. Dabi was almost always with Hawks, being the one who recruited him. Something told Midoriya that something was off about Hawks. A group of fans surrounded the hero, and Dabi walked away. Midoriya jogged up to the aloof villain. Dabi, are you sure Hawks is someone we need in our group? What if such a high-ranking hero double-crosses us? Dabi grinned and leaned into Midoriya. What? Perhaps you're just jealous? Deku blushed. No. I'm serious. Dabi laughed and patted Deku on the head. That's not something you need to worry about. Leave Hawks to me. Twice walked up behind Midoriya. Going through PBRI, kid? Midoriya jumped. What are you talking about? I went through PBRDY years ago. You look like a lovesick pup. Don't let Toga see you like that, Twice said, walking off. Lovesick? Midoriya thought. He and Dabi were obviously more than friends, but he didn't really know where they stood. He felt lost and didn't have anyone to talk to about it. Suddenly, his classmates popped into his mind. What am I thinking? They'd just laugh at me if they knew. Toga ran up. Izuku, wanna help me with something upstairs? Midoriya smiled. Sure thing. As he helped around the new hideout, organizing materials and babysitting the twins, his mind kept returning to Hawks. Jealousy was likely a factor in his dislike of the hero's presence, but there was a look in Hawks' eyes that made Midoriya uneasy. Occasionally, he would run into Hawks in areas he wasn't supposed to be, and sometimes he'd find Hawks observing him. Dabi would never hear him out long enough for Midoriya to say the word aloud. Spy. The hallway dimmed as the sun dropped closer to the mountains in the distance. Midoriya watched as the sky turned from blue to purple and pink. A tall, slim figure wrapped their strong arms around him. It only took him a moment to sense who embraced him. He leaned into the comfortable sensation. What are you doing, staring out the window for so long? Dabi asked, kissing Midoriya's temple and resting his cheek in Midoriya's fluffy hair. I'm just enjoying the colors of the evening sky. I can think of something else I'd like to be enjoying tonight. A heat rose to Midoriya's cheeks as he fidgeted, causing Dabi to chuckle. Dabi pulled Midoriya's face around to look at him, leaning in close. The tension rose as they felt each other's breath. What are you doing to my man, Dabi? Toga whined. Midoriya jumped at the sudden voice and backed away from Dabi, much to Dabi's displeasure. Dabi glared at Toga, his jaw clenched. Why did you interrupt? Just because you two are a thing doesn't mean I won't get in your way every chance I get. Toga giggled, spinning on her heel. After all, I called dibs long before you. Despite the dangerous things they did occasionally, this place felt peaceful. Midoriya smiled as he watched the two bicker. This was his happy home, his wonderful family. Dabi noticed Midoriya's goofy smile and ruffled his hair. That's enough for today. Let's go to bed. Oh, I'll come too. Toga squealed, skipping after them. No. Sleep in your own room. Midoriya laughed as Dabi led him back to their room. Dabi closed the door behind them, locking it. Like every night, Midoriya happily accepted Dabi's kisses as they made their way to the bed. As Midoriya felt the bed press against the back of his legs, Dabi pinned him down, hovering over him. Dabi grinned at Midoriya's flushed face. If you're not careful with that look, I might lose all reason. No, you won't. We've been like this for months, and you've never forced me. There's a first time for everything. The playful banter subsided as Dabi's smile faded. Midoriya stared up at him, wondering if something was wrong, but before he could speak, Dabi continued. Sometimes I want to take all of you before someone else does. What? No one could replace you for me, Dabi. Don't you know that by now? I'm giving you control, Izuku. I want you to feel comfortable with me, but if you knew some of the things I think about, I wonder if you'd still stay. I don't understand. But it's better that way. Dabi lifted himself off of Midoriya and sat on the edge of the bed. Izuku, if something happens during this war, remember that you are only a last resort weapon. You must stay out of the battles unless absolutely necessary. Yes. I remember, Midoriya mumbled, looking away. Good. With that, the two went silent. Only the sounds of their movements filled the room as they prepared for bed. Midoriya cuddled into Dabi's chest, worried. He wanted to be useful to his new family, but his quirk was taking a toll on him. However, that didn't matter. He'd gladly endure the pain to help Dabi. Only a cold morning light shone through the curtains, the room completely still, until the building shook, knocking Midoriya out of bed. Dabi stood, seemingly unfazed by the sudden jolt. He grabbed his jacket and walked for the door. What's going on? Midoriya jumped up, following Dabi. Before reaching the doorway, Dabi held him back. You stay here. Remember what we talked about last night. Midoriya clenched his fists, unable to argue with their agreement. Dabi patted his shoulder and disappeared down the hall. More explosions sounded, closer this time. The building shook as several windows cracked or shattered. The walls started to crack, giving way to some of the ceiling. Inside wasn't safe anymore as Midoriya searched for the twins. If he couldn't help with the fighting, he needed to at least keep the kids safe. Unfortunately, the twins' room was empty. They must have run off to hide when the building started shaking. Midoriya tried to keep a low profile as he searched nearby rooms. Heroes were slowly making their way through the building, and he worried the twins might be captured. As he debated his next move, an enormous explosion shook him off his feet. Stumbling to the window, he saw chaos below. Dozens, maybe over 100 heroes and villains were scrambling. Blue fire shot up into a tornado of flames in the distance. Dabi. Midoriya broke through the window and jumped down to the ground. He rushed onto the battlefield, searching for his comrades, but the chaos was overwhelming. Pushing past several people, he tried to make his way toward where he last saw Dabi's fire until he heard a familiar voice. Deku! As he turned to see Uraraka, her face twisted in shock and disbelief. Midoriya aimed his hand toward her, and Black Whip shot out, twisting and gripping the large boulder about to crush her. She slumped to the ground. Kirishima ran up to her, checking if she was okay before turning toward Midoriya, who had thrown the boulder aside. That was amazing, Midobro. Midobro, whatever. You guys should pay attention or you'll get seriously hurt. Midoriya turned to leave, but a voice stopped him. Deku, please. Uraraka pleaded, her voice cracking. This isn't you. You're too kind to participate in anything that would hurt people. Everyone has their breaking point, Uraraka. Maybe you all should have thought about that before. What are you talking about? We're best friends, remember? Friends? With the people who never accepted me, who tormented me. You're confused, Deku. We've been inseparable since the entrance exam. I know all your secrets, and you know all mine. That's a lie. Midoriya tried to think about his conversations with Uraraka, but his brain tugged, sending a jolt of electricity behind his eyes. You even know who I like. Would I have told you that if we didn't trust each other? Did he know that? He racked his brain and found a name told in a giddy voice, Uraraka's voice. Deku. You have to keep this a secret, okay? I'm finally going to ask Sue out. You should ask out your guy too, and we can double date. Deal? Midobro, our entire class admires you. We love you. Uraraka is right. This isn't you. You proved that the moment you saved her. Kirishima interjected. Midoriya. Midoriya turned to see Todoroki, who hesitantly walked toward the group. Midoriya's blood ran cold while his stomach churned from the memory of fighting Todoroki a few months back. Even though he felt justified in protecting the twins, hurting someone still left a bad taste in his mouth. If you don't want to end up hurt again, don't come any closer. Todoroki stopped and held onto his left arm, lowering his head. You don't have to come near me if you don't want to, Midoriya. Just please listen to what I have to say. I need to go. I love you. Midoriya froze in place, while Kirishima and Uraraka gasped at the sudden declaration. Todoroki took the opportunity to continue. At first, I didn't think much of anyone and focused only on my goals. But I saw how you treated everyone. As we got to know each other, I wanted to see you more and more. You broke through the wall of ice I created around myself and became my first friend. His first friend? Midoriya tried to think back to how they were together in 1A, but the headache returned, forcing him to grab his head as he doubled over. He got flashes of happily talking with his friends and the bonding moments they shared. His classmates tried to get closer to see what was wrong, but a roaring blue fire erupted between them. Midoriya looked back, startled. Dabi calmly walked toward the group. I told you to stay inside, Izuku. I'm sorry, Dabi. I was just worried about everyone. Come here. We need to get you out of here. As Dabi reached for Midoriya, spikes of ice burst from the ground. Dabi scoffed as he looked over to Todoroki. Todoroki jumped through the flames, covering himself with ice to avoid the worst of the heat. Don't touch Midoriya. Todoroki took a defensive stance directly between Dabi and Midoriya, glaring at the villain. Possessive much, Shoto? Dabi asked. Midoriya, please listen to me. I don't know what they have done to you, but our relationship isn't what you seem to think. Don't you remember how we had dinner with my family and Bakugou? Or how you sacrificed winning the sports festival just to help me overcome my family issues? Midoriya did remember those events. He recalled everything just as his classmates described, but every time he tried to envision a happy atmosphere with them, his headache worsened. Did this mean he was under the effects of a quirk? He looked up at Dabi, pleadingly. Dabi, what's going on? My head hurts. You're wasting my time. Dabi glared at Todoroki. I won't let you confuse him anymore. Dabi raised his hand, and Todoroki braced himself. To their surprise, Midoriya took the flames directly, protecting Todoroki. Izuku! Midoriya! Midoriya fell to his knees as Dabi extinguished his fire. Todoroki kneeled next to him and used his ice to cool the burns as best he could. His other classmates were just getting to him after avoiding the sea of flames. Uraraka helped some float overhead, while Kirishima forced his way through using his hardening, though he was scorched. The sudden kindness shook Midoriya, leading him to look up at Dabi with too many questions in his eyes. He could only sum them up. Was it all fake? Everything? Dabi looked around for the twins. There was no way they could enter this war zone to reinforce their hold. Dabi looked at the crumbling boy, covered in burns. He stilled his heart as he spoke. I have my orders. You either come with me or I take you all down. Midoriya's breath caught in his chest as his muscles tensed, prohibiting him from moving. Why won't you answer me? Was it really fake, even the things we did and said? Stuttered Midoriya, his burnt cheeks stinging as tears rolled down. You'd even hurt me? I guess now that the cat's out of the bag, there's no other option. Dabi began to raise his arms, ready to unleash destruction. Midoriya tried to jump up to push Dabi back, but Dabi jumped back just as an explosion hit the ground right below him. Bakugou emerged from the smoke. Get lost, you pyromaniac. Bakugou's strong presence somehow made Midoriya feel safe. The Bakugou Midoriya knew was a loner and a bully, but he could feel Bakugou's protectiveness in an instant. Kaken? Shut up, shitty nerd. I'm still mad about the warehouse. Bakugou. It's obvious Midobro was under the effects of a quirk, and he's really hurt right now. Can't you be a little nicer? Argued Kirishima. It's none of your business. Deku, you're coming back with us even if I have to drag you back, so I can yell at you for what you've put me through these past several months. Midoriya couldn't get a grip on the situation. Everyone felt so familiar and kind, even Bakugou. He was still mad and yelling, but it wasn't scary. Instead, there was a warmth to his words, like he was covering up embarrassment. The striking pain throughout Midoriya's head worsened, but he didn't mind. With every strike to his brain, he felt the warmth from his bonds with his classmates spread throughout his body. Everyone who could see Midoriya's face tensed as they saw his features twist. He bit his bottom lip as his chin scrunched up. His brows knit together, and the large, dewy eyes gave way to endless tears as he sobbed. Okay, Kaken. You can yell at me as much as you want. His smile shone through his tears, warming the hearts of all his friends. Bakugou smirked. That's more like it. He jumped towards Dabi, ready to unleash his power. Hear that, freak show? Wait! Screamed Midoriya, reaching out towards Bakugou and Dabi. He didn't understand why, but even after hearing everything was fake, he still couldn't stand the thought of Dabi getting hurt. However, Bakugou continued his assault, ready to take down one of the enemies who had taken his rival and childhood friend. Dabi swiped his hand across the space between them just as Bakugou let loose a powerful explosion. Swirling smoke and debris clouded them, leaving everyone with bated breath, waiting for the air to clear. Midoriya's heart sank at the sight beyond the thinning smoke. No dash beyond the dark smoke, for figures became visible. Bakugou had been pushed aside by Eraserhead, while the hero edge shot had pierced through Dabi's body like a blade. Dabi kneeled, clutching his stomach, blood spreading rapidly. Dabi! Midoriya struggled to his feet, his skin stinging from his burn with every movement. A hand grabbed onto his arm, but he pulled away, running towards his wounded partner. However, he found himself unable to move forward. He looked over to see Eraserhead staring at him, preventing Midoriya from using his quirk. Capture Midoriya! Shouted Eraserhead. In an instant, Midoriya was encased in ice up to his elbows. A hard strike to the back of his neck shocked him for a moment before everything went black. Kirishima grimaced at his hardened hand, guilt-ridden from striking his friend. Todoroki caught Midoriya's limp body as he melted the ice. A glint of light alerted the heterochromatic hero to cover the group with an ice wall, but as the reflective object rushed them, Bakugou deflected it. A dagger skipped across the ground as a crazy grin appeared behind Dabi. Her beige sweater was now stained with blood. That wasn't nice. What the hell? You almost hit Deku, shouted Bakugou, sparks flying from his hands. Yeah. Didn't you guys want him alive for something? Asked Uraraka. Aiza's been captured. She liked some blood off one of her knives and continued, If I can't have him, then why should you? Might as well enjoy his blood while I still have the chance. That's twisted, yelled Kirishima, his body hardening instinctively through his anger. Toga, we should go, grunted Dabi. What? But Aiza dash. We're outnumbered and I'm injured. We need to regroup. You're not going anywhere. Just as Edge shot towards them, a wall of blue fire surrounded the villains. In an instant, they vanished into the flames. Edge shot cursed, then turned to the group. Take that boy to the rendezvous point and make sure he's in anti-quirk cuffs. But Dekadash. Uraraka, Edge shot is right. We don't know what kind of brainwashing Midoriya is under. It's safer for all of us if he's confined at first, stated Kirishima. The group nodded before retreating from the battlefield. Once safe, Todoroki gently laid Midoriya down on one of the reserve beds for the injured. Kirishima put the cuffs on the boy, while each classmate frowned, conflicted seeing their friend in such a state. Icy hot dash. What is it? You shouldn't respond to his insults, Todoroki, said Uraraka. It's an insult? Both of you shut up. Calm down, Bakubro. I know this whole thing is stressful dash. You too, shitty hair. Icy hot, I heard what you said to Deku out there. What did I say? Asked Todoroki. Don't play dumb. You told me you thought of Deku as a friend. We are friends. But you told him that you loved him. Todoroki's eyes widened for a moment before he covered his mouth with his hand, a light pink showing on his cheeks. Kirishima, Uraraka, and Bakugou stared in disbelief at Todoroki's normally emotionless face. Well, I needed to get his attention, so I said that to make him stop, Todoroki explained. Is that the only reason, Todoroki? Uraraka asked. The four classmates stood in silence, the sounds of fighting echoing in the distance. Todoroki lowered his hand, his eyes gently closing and his jaw tensing. Bakugou couldn't take the silence anymore and broke it with an explosion from his palm. Spit it out, you half and half he shouted, grabbing Todoroki by the collar and pulling him close. I could see how you looked at that nerd for a long time. Bakugou, calm down, Kirishima urged, trying to separate them. This isn't the time or place. I didn't want to say anything to anyone about this because I never intended to tell him, Todoroki stated calmly. Why, Todoroki? Wouldn't you have just suffered keeping that to yourself? Uraraka asked, gently touching his arm in an attempt to comfort him. I didn't want to ruin our friendship. Telling him would mean outright rejection. We couldn't be friends anymore. No. You're a catch-to-do bro. Besides, Midoriya isn't the type to be harsh or hold it against you. He would have accepted your friendship even if he couldn't reciprocate your feelings, Kirishima insisted. Regardless, I needed something shocking to keep him listening. That was the only thing I could think of. Todoroki looked sternly at Bakugou. What about you? What about Bakugou? Uraraka asked, confused. You seem really interested in how I feel towards Midoriya. Why does it matter to you? It doesn't. I just thought it was irritating. The battlefield isn't the place to confess your feelings. I thought it was manly, Kirishima exclaimed. Shut it. Bakugou retorted. Well, if that's the case, then I guess it's fine, Todoroki said, satisfied with Bakugou's answer. Bakugou clicked his tongue and stomped away from the group. Todoroki and Kirishima watched him leave, unsure of what had riled him up. Uraraka, however, sensed the underlying tension and sat on the edge of Midoriya's bed, sighing. Deku, you've got a lot of problems when you wake up. An unease spread through the comfortable darkness as Midoriya's ears picked up muffled voices nearby. He scrunched his nose and slowly peeked into the bright room, his eyes stinging as they adjusted to the light. Midoriya, whispered a gentle, familiar voice. Took you long enough, nerd. Midoriya turned to see Todoroki sitting at his bedside, while Bakugou lounged in a desk chair with his feet propped up. Midoriya scanned the room, spotting his All Might merchandise in every corner. It took a moment for him to realize he was back in his dorm room. Why am I back here? As he tried to sit up, he felt his wrists tugged together by large cuffs. What the? I'm sorry about those, but it was a requirement if we wanted to bring you back to UA, Todoroki explained. Just be happy you're not in a jail cell, Bakugou grunted. Now that you're awake, I'll go tell Mr. Aizawa. I'll be back soon. Todoroki left the room, and Midoriya looked over to Bakugou, who kept his eyes on the floor, hands jammed into his pockets, refusing to face him. Kaken, why are you here? What kind of question is that? Bakugou snapped. I'd somewhat understand Todoroki after what he said. But I thought you all hated me. Bakugou dropped his feet from the desk, slamming them on the floor, startling Midoriya. He turned around, revealing bloodshot eyes and a scowl. Midoriya sank back into the bed, trying to distance himself from the intensity in Bakugou's gaze. Kaken, Shut your mouth. Bakugou leaned over Midoriya, hands on either side of him. Do you think you can get out of this by blaming it on other people? Even if they brainwashed you, I won't forgive you for giving up on being a hero. I thought you didn't want me to. I'm not done. You know what I had to deal with every day while you were off with villains. All those extras were moping around, worried about you. And you go off spouting nonsense about them treating you like CRP. The pounding in Midoriya's chest grew louder until he could hardly hear anything else. He squirmed underneath Bakugou's intense gaze, trying to escape, but Bakugou grabbed his face, forcing him to look up. Look at me while I'm speaking, shitty nerd. Kaken, you're too close. Can't you get off me? Midoriya whined, only agitating Bakugou further. He realized he had made a mistake when he saw the vein in Bakugou's forehead bulge. In an instant, Bakugou pulled down the collar of Midoriya's shirt, exposing his neck. "So, you want me to get off you, but it sure looks like you didn't mind if it were one of those villains. Is that right?" Midoriya felt himself blush, recalling the marks left by Dabi. He couldn't defend himself and found himself too embarrassed to look directly at Bakugou. "Forget you!" Bakugou shouted as he pushed himself off Midoriya. "Kaken!" Midoriya tried to sit up but was interrupted as the door opened. Mr. Aizawa and Todoroki entered, and Bakugou plopped back down into the desk chair, turning his back to Midoriya once again. "So, problem child, how are you feeling?" "Oh, I feel fine. I mean, I didn't really get hurt." Midoriya cut himself off as he remembered Dabi burned him. Then he realized his arms were bandaged. "Wait, I got burned by recovery girl treated you yesterday, so you should mostly be fine physically. What I meant to say was, how do you feel mentally? What can you remember?" I don't know. I remember headquarters coming under attack and my classmates. And that dork is still confused. Thinks everyone hates him. Seems whatever they did to you has lasting effects. How about your emotions? Todoroki and Bakugou said your emotions were extremely high when they met you in the warehouse and during the first rescue attempt. I feel pretty calm right now. As Midoriya thought back, he realized they were right. He became overly emotional when he fought them. At the moment, he didn't feel any real hostility towards them even though he remembered the abuse. Even when chaos erupted at the villain headquarters, he didn't feel that hostile towards any of them. But I see. Well, unfortunately, we can't release you from this room or the cuffs until we have a better understanding of the quirk you're under. It's best to rest for now. Perhaps the quirk will wear off over time. Midoriya nodded, easily accepting his situation. Then he glanced at Bakugou's back, confused about how the person who hated him most could seem to care so much. Unknown to him, another man in the room stared at him, just as focused on him as he was on Bakugou. "He's what now?" hissed Shigaraki. Beaten and bloody, the remaining forces of the League of Villains gathered in a secret tunnel under the mountain where the villain headquarters once stood strong. Compress unwrapped his gaze as Dabi held Compress's coat to his gut. Toga stood next to Dabi as Shigaraki glared daggers at them both. "The heroes captured Izuku," whimpered Toga, sniffing, missing her little cutie. "We need a plan to get back Stain's successor," exclaimed Spinner. "He was brainwashed. He wasn't really one of us," stated Yuta, his sister fiddling with her fingers through her sleeves. "How can you say that? Beyond the brainwashing, he cared about us. Like the rest of you, he accepted me for who I am," said Twice. "Who said I accepted you?" "That's mean," argued his other personalities. "Dabi, I ordered you to kill that brat if," shrieked Shigaraki, before Dabi interrupted. "If he turned his back on our group." Yeah. "I know." Dabi held his stomach as Compress finished wrapping it with bandages. "That's only if we can't bring him back. Besides, he was captured. He didn't choose to go. You know what I think? That act you've been putting on with that boy has gotten to your head." "More like his heart," squealed Toga as she spun on her tiptoes. "Enough, both of you. He's useful for our plans. But our quirks will wear off as time goes on. We've been with him daily for months now, so it could be a while before Yuta's suggestion wears off, but I need to look in his eyes within 24 hours before my overwhelming emotion leaves his nervous system," explained Yuya, barely able to make eye contact with Dabi. "We just need to recover for now." Dabi smirked as he thought about the shock on Midoriya's face when he saw Dabi injured. "Leave the rest to me." In the common room of the Class 1A dorms, Eraserhead and All Might tried to hold back the many students, trying to pass their teachers and see their friend. Midoriya's house arrest had been going on for days, with only the heroes, along with Bakugou and Todoroki, being able to see him. The many students argued that Midoriya was protecting them during the raid, regardless of their position. "We understand how you all feel, but it's still too soon to know if it's safe to let you all near Midoriya." "What about the trial?" "I heard one of the heroes at the raid saying Deku would be tried with the rest of the liberation," whimpered Uraraka, fighting the lump in her throat, her hands shaking. "Yeah. That isn't fair. He was being brainwashed, right? Exclaimed Kirishima. Technically, that's correct, but from Midoriya's explanation he did choose to stay with them, explained Eraserhead, also called Mr. Aizawa by his class of troublemakers. That's ridiculous. That's probably part of the brainwashing, retorted Kirishima. Regardless, we need to look further into the situation before we let you all see him. Once we have a better grasp of the situation, he will most likely be released from all charges. Mr. Aizawa crossed his arms, unwilling to relent to his students. Until then, only Bakugou and Todoroki will take turns watching over Midoriya, and a pro-hero will keep guard outside his room. Don't get any ideas. The students continued arguing and groaning. Although they couldn't make out the words, Midoriya and Bakugou could hear them mumbling from Midoriya's room. Sitting up on his bed, Midoriya fidgeted, glancing at the brooding blonde staring at him from across the room. What are you looking at, you diamond nerd? Sorry, Kaken. Midoriya thought. That's not an answer. It's just a bit awkward. We're never together like this, you know? Bakugou continued staring at his childhood friend. He seemed like the old Deku, no longer resisting, gentle, shaking in fear at his words alone. However, even Deku admitted he wasn't forced to stay with them. Bakugou lowered his head and held his hands together, his elbows resting on his knees. Deku, why did you want to stay with them so bad? Because they were kind. They treated me like family. Family? They are villains. That I had a hard time coming to terms with that too, but Dabi asked me something one time. He asked, who decides who are villains, and who are heroes? Bakugou jumped up and grabbed Midoriya by the shirt. They are murderers. Midoriya looked conflicted, remembering how they appeared during the fight. Bakugou slammed him back down on the bed. What's so bad about the heroes you've always admired that you turn to them? What about All Might? What about you, Kaken? Why have you always hated me? Todoroki walked in, curious about the commotion, and saw the two on the bed. What are you doing? Bakugou growled as he got off the bed and hit the wall before storming out. You watch the idiot tonight. I can't stand the sight of him. He slammed the door behind him, leaving Todoroki to look at Midoriya. Midoriya, are you okay? Yeah. Todoroki noticed the sadness in Midoriya's eyes. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, gripping Midoriya's hands. Midoriya, I'm so sorry. Midoriya's eyes widened as Todoroki continued, you were trying to protect me when you were captured. Midoriya spoke quickly, that's what heroes are supposed to do, right? Something felt off to Deku. Why is Todoroki? Why are you being so nice, Todoroki? Todoroki's expression shifted to concern. What do you mean? Midoriya thought, they're just watching me. I mean, I was with the Liberation. It would look bad if we were on bad terms now, right? No. It's fine. I think I understand. Todoroki. Todoroki searched Midoriya's face for clues but knew it would take time before things returned to normal. Midoriya is back. That's all that matters. I see. In that case, it's late and you've been through a lot. Please rest. Midoriya nodded and laid down. I'll go get your dinner. Be back in a bit. Midoriya watched the gentle Todoroki leave with a smile. He nearly drifted off to sleep when the door slammed open. Midoriya shot up in bed, eyes wide and heart racing. He saw a red-faced Bakugou entering the room. Catch dash, Bakugou slammed the end table next to Midoriya. You listen real good, Deku, because I am only going to say this once. Okay. For half a year, I was worried about you. Kadash. And then when I see you, you spout nonsense. Sorry. You're weak, stupid, and infuriating. Anything could have happened. Bakugou grabbed Midoriya by the hair. So don't ever worry me like that again. He let go and stomped out of the room, leaving Midoriya too stunned and confused to move. Todoroki peeked into the room, wondering if he left the door open. Midoriya, are you hungry? Yeah. Todoroki handed a bowl of pork katsudon to Midoriya before sitting down with his own soba. They ate in silence, which Todoroki was used to at home, but not with Midoriya. Midoriya, is something bothering you? Midoriya seemed lost in thought, unable to respond. Did They do anything to you? The League, I mean. What? No way. They were really nice. Everyone was like family. Sure, Toga wanted to drink my blood. The corners of Midoriya's mouth turned upward as his eyelids drooped softly over his doe eyes. But Dabi kept her from doing that. Todoroki paused, his heart seemingly stopping. Dabi, that's the guy with the blue flames, right? Midoriya nodded. He was my. Todoroki stood up. I'll take the dishes back. Oh, okay. Todoroki recalled what Bakugou said about Midoriya's neck during their fight in the warehouse. The person who touched him must have been Dabi. His heart clenched. Midoriya's eyes were so happy and nostalgic. Could he have been in love? Todoroki put the dishes in the kitchen, bumping into Bakugou along the way. Bakugou noticed Todoroki's expression and turned around. Hey, icy hot. What the hell is with that face? Silence. Todoroki was never the talkative type, but his lack of response was concerning. You just came from Deku's room, right? They must have done something to him. The way he talked about them. Especially that one. It was like. Bakugou grabbed Todoroki's shoulders, urging him to get to the point. Like what? Like he's in love with that villain. In an instant, Bakugou's blood ran cold, then heated up again. He ran off, his ears pounding and face growing red. Todoroki barely saw him leave. Would Midoriya ever go back to normal? Bakugou barged into Midoriya's room, startling him. Midoriya stood next to his desk, notebooks scattered, trying to figure out what was wrong with his childhood friend this time. Finally, he heard Bakugou speak in a deep, controlled voice, nearly a growl. Tell me, Deku, do you love one of them? Why would you? Answer me. I don't know. Bakugou looked intensely into Midoriya's eyes as he approached, causing Midoriya to back away. Once he cornered Midoriya against the window, Bakugou leaned in close. Remember this, you stupid nerd, you're not allowed to go back to him. I know you're mad but. No buts. You're supposed to be chasing after me. Midoriya was stunned into silence. I'm better than you, and better than him. Bakugou pushed away from the wall. I won't allow it. Got that? And he walked out of the room. What just happened? Midoriya sighed as he plopped into his desk chair. These two are going to give me whiplash. Later that night, Todoroki returned to Midoriya's room. Midoriya was already sound asleep, clutching his All Might plushie. Todoroki sat on the side of the bed, slowly reaching to touch those green locks he'd longed to run his fingers through. As the bed dipped, Midoriya stirred, stopping Todoroki's hand in an instant. Todoroki? Sorry, did I wake you? Todoroki gripped his hand, realizing he might have been caught. It's fine. Why aren't you in bed? Asked Midoriya as he rubbed his eye. Covered by the darkness, Midoriya couldn't see the blush across Todoroki's cheeks. As Todoroki thought about how to answer, he realized Midoriya's intent. Oh, you mean in my own bed? Yeah. It's late. I just want to be in here. Midoriya thought for a moment, then moved over. Well, if you're going to stay in here, then sleep in the bed with me. You're going to hurt your neck if you sleep in that chair every night. Are you sure? Yeah. It might be a bit cramped, but I'm fine with it if you are. Todoroki crawled into bed, facing Midoriya. They stared at each other, and Midoriya quickly became nervous. I guess it's even more cramped than I realized. There's a way to make this more comfortable. How? Asked Midoriya. Todoroki moved in, pulling Midoriya closer and wrapping his arms around him. Todoroki, isn't this better? I guess. Midoriya remembered what Todoroki said at the Liberation headquarters and blushed. He wasn't sure it was the right time, but he needed to ask, Todoroki, did you mean it? When you said you loved me? Midoriya couldn't see Todoroki's face, but he could feel the heat rising off his skin as he tightened his embrace. Would that bother you? Todoroki asked timidly. Of course not. You're an amazing person and I'd be flattered. Midoriya trailed off, unsure how to reply further. I just don't know how I feel after everything that's happened. I can wait, whispered Todoroki. I'll wait as long as you need. Todoroki stayed still, hoping Midoriya would allow it. His feelings. His embrace. Midoriya reached around Todoroki, gently holding on to his back. Midoriya's heart rate increased as he took in Todoroki's scent. There was something so pleasant about being in his arms. Wouldn't it be so much easier if he fell in love with the person in front of him, Midoriya thought. Neither boy said a word after that. They simply fell asleep in each other's arms. Bakugou barged into the room in the morning, shocking Midoriya awake. However, Todoroki still had a firm hold on him. "What the hell is this?" Bakugou exclaimed. Todoroki looked over his shoulder. "Can't you be a bit quieter? We're still trying to sleep." Bakugou pulled Todoroki out of bed. "Like hell. Nerd, you get up too." Right." Mr. Aizawa entered the room behind Bakugou, sighing at the rowdy boys. He used his quirk just as Bakugou was about to cause a scene. "I don't get paid enough for this. Both of you settle down." Mr. Aizawa turned towards Midoriya. "As for you, you seem pretty much back to normal. How are your memories?" "I'm sorry. It's all still a jumbled mess. I don't know how to separate what was real and what was fake." "I see. Well, all your classmates are causing a fuss. They won't stop asking to see you, so let me know when you are ready for visitors." "They want to see me?" "I know it's difficult to process when your memories are mixed up, but maybe seeing them will help put things in perspective. As for you two, you can't keep skipping classes to stay with Midoriya. I'll give you until the end of this week, but then I expect to see both of you in class." Without waiting for a reply, Mr. Aizawa walked out the bedroom door. Bakugou grumbled about their teacher while Todoroki yawned. Midoriya looked between the two people who had taken turns being by his. Suddenly, there were others who wanted to do the same. It didn't make sense, and his head felt like it was splitting open again. "Midoriya? Are you okay?" asked Todoroki, reaching out to gently touch Midoriya's cheek. "I don't understand. I can remember that everyone hated me. So why are you all acting like this?" "You really are an idiot," said Bakugou. "Obviously, those villains used a brainwashing quirk on you. Everyone loves you, Midoriya. There's not a single one of us that would ever want you hurt." Bakugou looked away, agitated, but didn't deny it. "The more time that goes by, I start to remember bits and pieces of kindness shown to me. But how do I know which memories are real? I'm really confused." Bakugou walked up to Midoriya calmly, pushing Todoroki out of the way, and held Midoriya's face. "Kaken?" Bakugou leaned in, surprising Todoroki. Bakugou looked over to Todoroki mid-kiss to make eye contact before Midoriya reacted and pushed him away. "WI? I'm clarifying my position in all this. Don't forget it." Bakugou walked away with a wide smirk on his face. Midoriya looked more confused, unaware of the look on Todoroki's face as he clenched his fists. Uraraka couldn't bring herself to let go of her best friend, and Midoriya didn't seem to mind. He felt his arms tighten slightly around her small figure. Her touch, voice, and smell brought him comfort. "Ochako has been really worried about you, Midoriya," croaked Sue. "Normally, I'd say this is inappropriate behavior, but I understand how she feels," stated Ida. Midoriya looked up from Uraraka's shoulder to see Sue and Ida smiling gently at him. The soft look in their eyes held him. He could tell these people loved him. "I'm sorry I worried everyone." He reached out a fist towards Ida, and Ida reciprocated the gesture, bumping their fists together. "It wasn't your fault, my friend." "Karo. That's right. We're just glad you're okay." "Karo." Midoriya could trust these three. He felt it in his bones. Even more than the two in front of him, he could confide anything in the girl in his arms. She had barely said a word after her initial outburst of tears when she was allowed to enter his room. He wasn't used to her normally energetic personality being so docile. "Thank you guys. I think I understand better now." "What do you understand?" "Ever since I got back, I couldn't distinguish what was fake and what was real. But I can feel the bond we all share. That makes it clear, what I felt with the villains was simply delusion." "Midoriya? You look really sad." "Karo. Are you okay, Midoriya?" "Deku." Uraraka pulled back to see his face. She wiped her finger across his cheek. "Why are you crying?" Midoriya touched his cheek and saw the liquid on his finger. He should have been over the moon that all the hardships he remembered with his classmates were false, but something nagged at him. Was it all fake? The league was full of eccentrics, but they were so kind to him. Yuya and Yuta were adorable and clung to him like little siblings. Twice was always so supportive. And Dabi was. Guys, can I have some time alone with Uraraka? Please? Confused, Ida and Tsu left the room. Despite not understanding, they knew Uraraka could get to the bottom of the issue. Uraraka and Midoriya had an oddly tight bond since the beginning of school, so she was the best person to comfort him through whatever he was conflicted about. What's wrong, Deku? Will you keep this a secret? Of course. I know all your secrets and you know all mine, remember? I fell in love with one of them. One of the villains? Uraraka exclaimed. Midoriya nodded, fiddling with his fingers. Which one? Dabi. Wow. So how do you feel now? How am I supposed to feel? He tried to hurt us. Even me, right? I'm so sorry, Deku. That wasn't what he wanted to hear. He didn't remember it wrong, the look of Dabi's palms as he attempted to harm them all, including Midoriya. Uraraka hugged Midoriya's shaking form before he realized he was sobbing. What do I do? I can't stop thinking of him. I don't know. You were brainwashed. Are you sure your feelings weren't part of that? I can't know for certain if what I experienced was real or designed, but I know I love him. Uraraka, he held me. Kissed me. Uraraka's entire face beamed red. Held you? Kissed you? Midoriya tried to quiet her down by covering her mouth. Her muffled apology signaled him to take his hands away. I mean, you wouldn't do those things with someone you didn't love, right? Uraraka stared at her pitiful friend, nearly in tears. She couldn't respond, knowing that it wasn't as simple as love. They both knew, regardless of how Dabi felt. Only tragedy awaited the lovers. Why couldn't you have fallen for Todoroki? That I wish I had. And then there's Kaken. Uraraka raised an eyebrow, not sure where this was going. He kissed me. What? Bakugou? Midoriya nodded. Now that surprises me. Here's the thing, Kaken's aggression reminds me a bit of Dabi's dominating. Oh. Oversharing. Okay. I was just gonna say that there are similarities, and the same with Todoroki. Their eyes are similar, and they can be so gentle. Deku. With the oversharing. I didn't mean it that way, exclaimed the bright red boy. Right, well look, you know it could never work out with a villain, no matter how much you want it to. I hate to say it, Death. I wish your first time in love was sweeter. However, you've got a great guy and Bakugou in love with you. I caught that, Uraraka. I'm just saying maybe you can fall in love with someone else. You were close before. Uraraka grabbed Midoriya's arms, gently gripping them. Deku, it'll take time to recover, but you'd be happier with someone else. I'm sorry. The door opened, All Might standing in the doorway. Time was up. Uraraka smiled at Midoriya, giving him one last hug before they parted. He watched her leave as the door closed. Midoriya knew she was right. He thought so too, but every time he thought about giving in to Todoroki or Bakugou, he couldn't. Those blue eyes pierced his heart. The memories of his touch made his skin tingle. How could he fall in love with someone else if Dabi possessed his entire being? She said he was close to falling in love before? Midoriya thought back to his memories of Uraraka confessing her crush to him. She said he had a crush too. But who? His memories were still foggy, so although he knew they all cared for him, he couldn't quite remember how he felt about most of his classmates. Midoriya laid down, clutching his pillow close. If he could remember who it was, could he forget Dabi? Would the pain in his chest subside? Would the longing fade? Desperation filled him as he prayed to remember. However, he was only met with the silence in the room. I can go outside? A sleepy Mr. Aizawa and a grinning All Might stood in front of Midoriya in his room, telling him something he didn't expect. His friends gave reports on their visits and Midoriya's state. Once they were all reviewed, the authorities and teachers agreed it was okay for Midoriya to go on supervised walks. You will have 2 heroes attending the walks as well, to defend you in case of an attack, but yes, you may go outside. Isn't this great, young Midoriya? You'll be able to leave your room for the first time in weeks. Yes. Thank you. You must maintain vigilance though, problem child. And you must stay with your guards no matter what. Understand? Yes, sir. All Might gave a thumbs up as he followed Mr. Aizawa walked down the hall, making Midoriya smile. A hand rested on Midoriya's shoulder, and he looked back to see the shark-toothed grin of Kirishima. Hey, what's up, Midobro? It's been a while since I've seen you out of your room. Yeah. Mr. Aizawa just gave me permission to leave my room as long as I have the guards skirting me. That's great. Congratulations. By the way, remember it's my and Kaminari's turn to visit you this evening, so look forward to it. We've got a killer new game we've been dying to show you. That sounds like fun. I'll definitely look forward to it. Kirishima's energy was infectious to Midoriya as he watched the redhead run off. His situation felt surreal. Each of his classmates took time to keep him company. Despite being confined to a single room for so long, he barely had time to himself. Todoroki and Bakugou still took turns staying in Midoriya's room at night, but his evenings were spent laughing and catching up with his friends. The word felt foreign and fragile until recently. His heart fluttered, knowing he had so many people who cared about him. Yet, the family he found in the league still stung his heart. Uraraka was right, it would take time before he could come to terms with his feelings. Midoriya smiled at the guards as they approached him, deciding to put those feelings aside for the day. It had been weeks since he had fresh air, and he was going to enjoy every second of this walk. That night, Kaminari burst in with his usual dorky swagger, pointing his fingers at Midoriya as he exclaimed his arrival. Kirishima walked in right behind him, holding the new game aloft. After a couple of hours of loud and rowdy competition, they finally conceded the win to Kirishima. Midobro, today was your first time outside in a while. How was it? It was nice to get out of this room, but it can be awkward to be followed around by two pros that don't even talk to you. Yeah. That sounds nerve-wracking. Hey, I know. We should all sleep in here tonight. We barely get to see you and we can play more. That'd be fun, but it's Kaken's turn tonight. I feel like he'd get mad if I... What about Bakugou? You know, to stay the night. What? Kamibro, calm down. Wait, you knew? How come I didn't know? Because you and Mina can't control yourselves, said Kirishima. Well, at least I'm not the only one. Wait, you said it was Bakugou's turn. Who else sleeps over? Todoroki. I can't believe he's sharing at all considering how possessive of you he is. Possessive? You should see him going off about. Kirishima covered Kaminari's mouth, trying to figure out how to change the subject, but Midoriya's interest was piqued. He pulled on Kirishima's arm to free Kaminari. What were you saying? WL. Started Kaminari, suddenly realizing he wasn't supposed to talk about such things. Just don't tell Bakugou I told you. Midoriya nodded. Well, he gets extra irritated when he's hung out with us at night. I guess that must be the nights Todoroki is sleeping over. That would make sense. Anyway, Bakugou is just scared you'll be stolen away, interjected Kirishima. I don't get any of this. I mean, sure he's shown interest lately, but before he only ever yelled at me. He hated me. That's just Bakugou. He wouldn't have acted that way towards you if he didn't care at all, you know? It's like that saying, there's a thin line between love and hate, said Kaminari. Seriously? Asked Kirishima. Kaminari looked between an exhausted Kirishima and a worried Midoriya. Kirishima broke the tension by speaking to Midoriya. Bakugou probably will be here soon, so let me say one last thing. I know how much he cares for you. Please, just think about it. Before Midoriya could answer, the door slammed against the wall. The hell? You extras still here? We were just leaving, said Kirishima with his usual toothy grin. Yeah, we're not sneaking around like some people. A strong hand gripped Kaminari's collar. What do you think will happen if I create a spark right now? I won't say anything. I promise. Bakugou shoved him out into the hall before slamming the door behind him. He looked down at Midoriya, whose bright green eyes were staring deep into his, obviously pondering something. However, Bakugou was too tired to dive into something so troublesome, so he grabbed Midoriya and tossed him onto the bed. Bakugou slid into bed and turned his back to Midoriya. Midoriya knew Bakugou usually went to sleep earlier, but he had been waiting so Midoriya could spend time with their classmates. Bakugou wasn't much for talking, which made it hard to bring up the things Midoriya was concerned about. He had promised to keep what Kaminari told him a secret, so he turned away from his childhood friend to sleep. Days passed joyfully for Midoriya. The weather was clear and appealing during his daily walks. His friends continued their diligent visits. Midoriya's memories were finally becoming clear. Even so, that did not erase the time he spent with Dabi or the others. Midoriya looked up at the blue sky, the same color as that man's eyes. He continued following the guard in front of him as he daydreamed. It was obviously better here, he thought, so why did he yearn to go back? He shook his head, trying to discard the memories tugging at his heart. With every day he spent with his friends, the clearer his memories of his classmates became. As Uraraka said, he should find a new love, and he had two people who cared for him. Well, Uraraka had an obvious favorite, but was that the person he wanted? Falling deeper in thought, he tried to picture who he watched most over his time as a UA student. Todoroki or Bakugou. That blue iris flashed in his mind again. He couldn't let himself think of that appealing blue. As he was thinking this, the SE behind him wrapped their arms around him. "Wadash," squeaked Midoriya. "Hi Izuku. I've missed you," said the deep, gruff voice of the guard. Toga. Somehow seeing a middle-aged man staring at him with such excitement greatly disturbed Midoriya. He looked ahead to alert the other guard, but the guard smiled at him with the same unsettling expression as the one holding him. "Is he you too? My Izuku is so smart. Twice made a copy of me," she explained. "Can't you let go of me, Toga?" "Why? I like touching you. It's kind of weird how I'm being held by an old guy, you know?" Sludge began streaming down Midoriya's shoulder as the meaty man behind him shrunk in size. Midoriya felt the soft lumps against his back as Toga's real face kissed his cheek. "So it's okay if it's a pretty girl, right?" "Wait, Toga, are you naked?" "Naughty Izuku. You can't ask a lady that." "Oh geez." She was having too much fun with this, he thought. Midoriya unzipped his PE uniform, revealing his black t-shirt, and slid off his jacket, having to force it down between their bodies. Then he held it behind him, offering it to the girl. She wasn't completely sure how to take his response, but giddily took the jacket, covering herself. "You're always such a gentleman. Come on, let's get back to the others." "Toga, I don't know." The crazed girl stared at the conflicted expression on her crush. He gripped at the bottom of his shirt, his foot shuffling beneath him, lightly kicking at pebbles. "Are you saying you don't want to come back?" "I'm just confused that I need time to think." Toga smiled. Midoriya stiffened, his hands and feet frozen. He tried to speak her name, to stop her erratic thoughts, yet he could only mouth. "Why?" "Because Shigaraki said I can kill you if you refuse." Toga's smile widened as she pulled out a syringe. Shocked, Midoriya jumped back. "What are you talking about? I thought we were friends." "I'd rather have you to look at every day, my little cutie, but if you won't come back with me, the least you could do is let me drink your blood. I'm sure it's delicious." Deku raised his arm to ready an attack. "Don't take another step." "Oh, so cute." A familiar silhouette emerged from the shadows, his deep voice making Midoriya's heart race. "Toga, you won't need to do that." "But Shigaraki said dash. Only if we can't bring him back." "I will." Midoriya hesitated. The last year, every time he used his powers, it harmed his body from the inside out. He was almost better from the raid, but he knew these two were strong. What if he didn't have the strength? But if he caused a disturbance, someone should report what was going on. He looked cautiously around to find the best point of impact to cause the loudest damage. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. This area is surrounded by residents and a daycare. If you aren't careful, those poor innocent kids might become hostages. Or worse." Deku froze. He couldn't chance hurting innocent people. Even if Dabi was lying about the kids, there were probably civilians in the area. He hadn't even realized the guards had led him so far away from campus. "I think it's time you take a little nap," stated Dabi. As night fell, Bakugou approached Midoriya's room. To his irritation, the others were still surrounding his door. Uraraka and Tsu called out to Bakugou as they saw him approach. "Bakugou, have you seen Deku? Isn't the nerd supposed to be with you right now?" "Well, we were supposed to hang out, but he's not here." Bakugou barged into Midoriya's room again, but he wasn't there, just like they said. Only one person would be so reckless, he thought, so he ran to Todoroki's door, kicking it down. Todoroki just stared in disbelief, his door laying on the floor in pieces. "Where's the nerd? I know you have him." "I don't have Midoriya." "Then where is he?" "I don't know. Maybe he took his walk a bit later today." Both men knew the odds of this being true, so they each ran out to find Midoriya, passing everyone like a blur. They needed to be sure Midoriya was okay, that he was just running late on his walk or talking to one of the teachers. They raced through the path Midoriya usually took. They looped around the course twice before admitting he wasn't on his daily stroll. As they made their way back, Todoroki heard a faint noise down one of the alleys. Todoroki broke off from Bakugou in search of the noise. "Where are you going?" "There's something this way." Todoroki came to a dumpster, a muffled noise echoing from inside. "In here." Bakugou cracked his knuckles, ready to strike as Todoroki slowly lifted the lid of the dumpster. Both heroes scrunched up their noses as they took in the sight within. Blood. Lots of blood. When Midoriya woke up, he was in a locked room. He stood in front of the nearest door, which he quickly broke down. On the other side, Dabi stood, staring at him. "Well, that was rude. You just destroyed our door." "What's the meaning of this, Dabi?" "I thought dash." Dabi started walking towards Midoriya, making him tense and back up into the room. "You thought what? That we were really a family? You're really naive, Izuku." Dabi leaned down to Midoriya's face. "We're not." "Then why don't you all kill me?" Toga seemed ready to. "That's just if I can't control you. But you're going to be a good boy and stay here quietly." "Why?" "I don't like it when someone takes what's mine." Midoriya glared at him. "You think you have a chance to escape? You can try. But there's no reason to keep me around. I won't help you guys anymore." Dabi leaned in, causing Midoriya to blush and back away. "That's true. There's no strategic reason not to kill you. Instead, I'll keep you for myself." Dabi held the back of Midoriya's head and kissed him. "Remember what I said when we started all this? Don't think you can run away now." Midoriya pushed Dabi away, quickly covering his lower face with his arm to hide his blush. Despite his situation, Dabi always messed with his head. The effect Dabi had on him made his blood boil. "Aizu, you love us, right?" asked a small voice. "Yeah." Midoriya looked down to see the small child in white, looking up at him with teary eyes. Her arms pulled into her sides, and a tiny hand gripped his shirt. His heart squeezed, seeing her hesitation. She was just a child, pulled into a bad situation. "Of course I do," whimpered Midoriya. "Yeah, go tell Compress about the door. I'm taking Izuku to a different room for now." Dabi held onto Midoriya's hand, pulling him away from the broken door. Midoriya looked up at Dabi's back, his broad shoulders leading the way. His hand felt warm, and Midoriya found it difficult to pull away. What was Dabi thinking? What did he really feel? Did his heart race with the smallest touch like his? Midoriya didn't want to pull away until he knew the truth. Dabi opened a door down the hall, guiding Midoriya inside. "This will be your new room." "Dabi, do you feel bad at all for bringing children into this life? You don't know anything about those two. Who's to say they didn't have it worse where they were before?" "Then enlighten me." The twins were put in an asylum by their cousins after their parents died in a murder-suicide. They didn't want to raise kids who caused them distress. Distress? Well, knowing you, you've probably somewhat figured their quirks out by now, so there's no harm telling you, I guess. Yuda's quirk is called suggestion. He can suggest things like scenarios until the person he's using it on believes it. Like brainwashing. Dabi leaned against the shut door, obviously disinterested in the story he was telling. "We call Yuya's quirk Overwhelm. She can take pre-existing emotions and heighten them. You can imagine what two grieving children with those quirks could do to the people around them. Even the doctors at the ward kept them in solitary to avoid the same effects. But they are just kids. That doesn't matter to some people. My father was the same way. He abandoned me for my younger brother, Shoto, when he showed more promise and trained him ruthlessly. The stoic expression on Dabi's face turned sour as he spoke about his family. Endeavor, a revered hero, never cared about anyone but himself. So, how do you expect normal citizens to act? Wait, Endeavor? My father? Midoriya's eyes widened, his breath frozen in place. Dabi looked at him, those cold blue eyes striking Midoriya, just as Shoto Todoroki's did at the sports festival. That one blue eye looked so similar to Dabi's. No wonder. They were brothers. Why are you telling me this now? You avoided telling me this kind of stuff before. Before I held back on a lot of things to avoid doing something that might disillusion you. Telling you about Shoto's past might have made you want to go back to him. There's no point in secrets now though. You don't have a choice but to stay. Why are you doing all this? What about Todoroki? What about your other siblings and your mom? Don't you think they'd be sad if they knew how you have been living? That's besides the point. My only reason to live is killing that man. This isn't right, Dabi, and you know it. Don't let your father control how you live. You could be someone great. Will you shut up? Dabi grabbed Midoriya's arm and pulled him against his chest. Their eyes locked, both knowing and wanting to connect. Grabbing the back of Midoriya's head, Dabi pulled him closer until their lips crashed together. Midoriya fought to keep up with the most passionate kiss they ever shared. He stumbled backward as Dabi pressed on. Barely disconnecting for a moment, Dabi pinned him down on the bed. Dabi, stop. What's gotten into you? Demanded Midoriya. Remember, I said I held back before. Dabi smirked as he slid his hand under Midoriya's back. Comfortable breathing gently lifted Midoriya's chest in a calm rhythm as he snuggled into the warmth next to him. He reluctantly opened his eyes. The room was dark, but he was once again under an unfamiliar ceiling. He felt a weight over his chest, causing him to look down to see an arm leading to a figure with dark hair. Midoriya fumbled away from the figure. What's wrong, Izuku? Dabi turned onto his back, smirking, his eyes never leaving Midoriya. Midoriya racked his brain to remember how they ended up like this. He remembered kissing and touching a bit but then nothing. He was at least still in his underwear, and as he moved away, the sheets pulled down showing Dabi had breathes on. Had he already been brainwashed somehow? His memories and dreams seemed scrambled. He snapped back to reality when he realized Dabi's face was right in front of him. Midoriya stumbled backward and fell off the bed. Dabi laughed, taking the chance to get out of bed himself. You really are innocent. What happened? What do you think? Dabi put on his shirt. I have to go. The twins will babysit you. He opened the door, revealing the twins waiting outside. Be a good boy while I'm gone. After Dabi vanished from sight, Midoriya took a moment to sit in silence, racking his brain for any sliver of memory from the previous night. A familiar heat rose to his cheeks as he pictured Dabi's intensity. They had struggled against each other for what seemed like hours, and Midoriya felt overwhelmed. Had he passed out at some point? The door hesitantly opened, a small hand gripping the frame as Yuya peeked in. She waited, unsure how the young hero would react to her presence. Midoriya remembered he was basically naked and quickly pulled the sheets off the bed to cover himself. A shirt and jeans came into his vision as he finished wrapping himself. Yuya was nearly in tears as she silently offered Midoriya clothes. Thanks, said Midoriya as he took the clothes from her tiny hands. He slipped his arms into the sleeves as he searched his mind for the right thing to say. How should he feel for one of the people who tricked him? Aizu, are you mad at us now? Asked Yuya. Midoriya looked up at her sweet face, tears welling up in her eyes. I certainly don't like being tricked, he said, but soon patted her head. But I know you didn't want to. He caught a glimpse of white in the doorway, leading his eye over to the emotionless expression of Yuta. How about you, Yuta? What about me? Does any of this bother you? Asked Midoriya. I don't know. I just do what I'm told. Yuta closed the door and walked in, headed for the bed. Then have you already started brainwashing me? Does it feel like I've altered your memories? Asked Yuta. Midoriya felt strange since he woke up, like his dreams were scrambled, and he had a hard time saying no to Dabi the previous night. He was definitely under some kind of control. However, he could easily remember his good relationships with his classmates. Yuta looked over to Midoriya from his position on the bed. There'd be no use trying to use my quirk on you now that you know how it works. You'd be able to fight it. So if not you then. Midoriya turned back towards Yuya, seeing her looking down at her hands as she wrung her sleeves. Yeah, be honest with me. I'm sorry, Aizu. Yuya looked straight into Midoriya's eyes as she let her tears fall. I just don't want you to leave. She gripped onto Midoriya's shirt as she clung to him. Please don't leave us. You're the only one who loves us. Midoriya's heart ached as he wrapped his arms around her trembling body. He understood her quirk only heightened his emotions, but he couldn't turn away from her. Whether she was controlling him or not, he could tell her sobs were genuine. Dabi had said that she could only heighten one emotion at a time, so what emotion was she drawing on that was forcing him to act the way he had since he woke up? He couldn't say no to Dabi. Every time he thought of leaving, his stomach churned. Finally, he didn't want to let go of the girl in his arms. If he could put one word to it all. Yeah, I love you so much. He tightened his hold on the little girl. You and Yuta are like a little brother and little sister to me. So, you won't leave, right? Midoriya smiled down bitterly as he spoke. I'm sorry, but you know this isn't right. He wiped some tears off her flushed cheeks. I need to go back to all my friends. Yuta turned onto his side towards his sister and Midoriya. What about Dabi? Don't even try, Yuta. Midoriya smiled at the boy, who frowned in defeat, his own tears starting to well in his eyes. I've made my decision. Midoriya admitted it to himself. He must have had real feelings for Dabi. That's why he didn't want to leave. However, their relationship felt fabricated. He fell for someone who he thought cared deeply for him when no one else did, but that wasn't true. He now knew he had people who cared for him. His mom, classmates, Todoroki, and even Bakugou. He couldn't stay there. People were worried about him. If you want to make this up to me though, said Midoriya as he patted Yuya's hair, I have a proposition. Bakugou and Todoroki stood in front of Mr. Aizawa and All Might, pleading to go out searching for Midoriya, hoping it wasn't too late to catch up. The 2 guards you found in the dumpster may not make it, and you already know the amount of casualties we faced against the liberation, said Mr. Aizawa, glaring at his students. We can't send 2 students after them. I know how hard this is on you both. We just got him back not long ago, said All Might. This is unfair. Bakugou exclaimed, ready to push past his teachers, but a stern hand gripped his shoulder. He glared up into the tired eyes of his homeroom teacher. Bakugou, remember how running off on your own yielded no results when he was kidnapped before. He's right, young Bakugou. We will gather who we can to do reconnaissance, but other than that, we can't do anything more. You call him your successor and you're okay with leaving things like this? Asked Bakugou. All Might stepped back, shocked that Bakugou said that in front of others. Todoroki looked over to All Might. Successor? He knew he was right about Midoriya being All Might's secret child. I'm sorry, young man, but there's just nothing we can do for him. But, Todoroki interjected, they were willing to harm him the last time we saw them, and Midoriya's memories aren't all back yet. Todoroki thought back to the marks on Midoriya's neck. What if something worse happens to him this time? Silence filled the room. All Might didn't want to admit that things were worse off than the last time Midoriya was taken. Mr. Aizawa pulled his scarf up over his chin as he sighed, looking away from his students. I'm sorry. Midoriya snuck through the building, which reminded him of the original factory he was held in at the start of this ordeal. He knew if he was getting out this time, he only had 2 options. His best option was to sneak out without coming in contact with any of the villains. Easier said than done. His second option was, where do you think you are going? Midoriya turned around to find Dabi towering over him. Those brats aren't doing their job properly. They were no match for me now that I know how their quirks work. They aren't fighters. Dabi grabbed Midoriya's wrist, pulling him close, but Midoriya yanked himself away. It took me a while to figure out, since I thought you'd use the same tactics as last time, manipulating my memories. Instead, Midoriya clenched his fist, tears forming in his eyes. You're manipulating my feelings for you. Your feelings are yours. They are only enhanced. Dabi smiled. I didn't force you to feel this way. Besides, you might as well give in after last night. No need to be shy. Dabi reached out towards Midoriya again, only for his hand to be slapped away. Don't touch me. Midoriya blushed but continued to argue. We didn't do anything. I don't remember too much, but from what I understand, a person's first time is supposed to hurt. I am perfectly fine. Midoriya backed away. You never loved me, did you? It was a game. That's why you never went too far. Did it disgust you to have to touch me like that? If that were true, do you think I'd bring you back or stop the others from harming you? Dabi glared down at the smaller man, his arms tensing. Let's make something clear, Izuku. I am a villain. There is no redemption for the things I've done, so I can never go back to normal society. Which means, if we're to be together, it has to be like this. I can't. What? You're right, I love you. But I can't stay, no matter how much it hurts to leave. Midoriya looked Dabi in the eyes. The idea of leaving this man tore him up inside, but he understood he needed to close off his heart. He needed to escape. So choose. Will you harm me or let me go? Who says there's not a third option? I promise I'll fight my way out of here, Dabi, even against you. I'll go down fighting if I have to. They stood in silence, staring each other down. Last time, it seemed like you were willing to harm me. What about now? Dabi squeezed his fists. Midoriya was giving him only one option, to fight, but he couldn't move. His body froze at the sight of those big green eyes declaring war against him. Could he attack? Back at the Liberation headquarters, he hesitated, leaving room for the heroes to counter, and allowing Midoriya to be taken away. This time he couldn't even raise his hand from his side. Movement caught Dabi's eye. He looked far behind Midoriya to see the trembling child. Yuya stared at Dabi, scared but determined. The previous night, Midoriya couldn't fight against his feelings. Now it was Dabi who couldn't fight. So, you turned her. I wasn't sure if it was fake on your end, but I needed to know, so I asked Yuya for her help. Plus, if I was going to have any real chance of getting out of here, I'd need your help. Midoriya took a step closer to Dabi, looking up at the man he admitted to love. Be honest. Could you harm me now? Dabi clenched his jaw. How could he answer Midoriya? He had never known love, but if he were honest, you know I can't harm you. He was possessive of Midoriya. He looked forward to each night when he could hold him. He worried when he couldn't be there with him. When did it become like this? A tear dropped to the floor. Midoriya smiled as more tears drenched his cheeks. Thank God. He rubbed his eyes, trying to stop himself from sobbing. I was so scared that you didn't care. I wish I didn't. Dabi wiped some tears from his lover's face. This would be so much easier if I could just move on. So, what now? Dabi took a moment to think, staring into the sea of green that calmed him. There was no way to confine Midoriya any longer, and he would be in danger of the villains if he left. Then Midoriya would have to move on, and probably find a new love. Dabi's heart wrenched. That wouldn't do. Couldn't you come with me? Asked Midoriya. No. As I said, there's no future for me out there. I still have my goals as well. Killing Endeavor won't solve anything, Dabi. Midoriya gripped Dabi's hand. There's plenty out there to live for. Let's live for each other. Dabi gripped Midoriya's hand back. That'd be nice, but you know it's not possible. Dabi let go of Midoriya's hand. For now, let's get you out of here. Midoriya's gaze dropped. There was no way they could be together outside the league. Dabi was right. All the families of the people he harmed would want retribution. He signaled the twins to follow him before following behind the stoic, dark figure. This would be the last time they could walk side by side. Dabi's back always looked so solid, leading Midoriya wherever they went. However, it no longer looked confident. Dabi's shoulders were slumped, but his arms tensed. Each step was hesitant. Once you are out safely, you need to be aware that the rest of them will be coming to kill you. No more tricks, just murder, stated Dabi. Thank you. For what? For caring about me. Dabi didn't respond. With every step he took, with every word he spoke, he felt like the world was crashing down on him. He bit the inside of his cheek, trying to distract himself, inwardly blaming the child who used her quirk on him for the pain in his chest. Dabi, are you sure you don't want to come with? Stop. Don't say anything else. Dabi kept his eyes on the path ahead, unable to look back at the three behind him. His mind raced searching for an impossible answer. I can't stand to hear your voice anymore. Midoriya wanted to apologize, but he decided to do as Dabi requested, to remain silent. Although Dabi was still helping them escape, he felt doubt over Dabi's feelings rising again. The actions Midoriya had taken, the manipulation, could have made his lover resent him. His heart twisted, and he found himself doubting his own determination. His timid hand reached out to Dabi's sleeve, unprompted by any quirk, only his aching heart. As Midoriya's fingertips grazed the cloth of Dabi's jacket, the wall next to them disintegrated, revealing Shigaraki. The once demented eyes of an overgrown child glared at the group sharply, calmly finding their target. His arms stretched out towards Midoriya, who was frozen at the sight of this nearly all-powerful being. The collar of Midoriya's shirt pulled on his throat, choking him as his whole body was thrown back. His back hit the wall harshly. He rubbed his throat as he looked up at the tall figure standing between him and Shigaraki. Dabi, what is this? Asked Shigaraki. Dabi didn't bother answering. There was no use and they both knew it. I see. Then you'll have to die too. In an instant, the hall glowed a blue hue as Shigaraki dodged Dabi's flames. Midoriya grabbed the twins, enveloping them in his arms and rolling them to one side. A sharp pain struck Midoriya's back. Yuya screamed when she saw Toga behind Midoriya with one of her syringes filling up with Midoriya's blood. Dabi looked back as he heard the scream, raising his arm towards Toga, releasing a steady stream of fire until he just barely escaped Shigaraki's hand aimed at his head. Midoriya reached back, gripping the syringe. He took a deep breath before yanking it out in one swift motion. Yuya couldn't form the words to ask about his injury, so he simply smiled at her, hoping to calm her. Before he could comfort her, though, Yuta screamed out something, alerting Midoriya that danger was near. Picked them up and jumped just out of reach. One of the lackeys from the Liberation stood dumbfounded that he missed with his large club for an arm. How could Midoriya strike back, he thought. He couldn't leave the twins to fend for themselves. More of the remaining forces started pouring into the area. Some closed in near Dabi, while others started towards Midoriya and the twins. There was only one escape route left directly behind Midoriya, but Dabi was surrounded and was holding off Shigaraki alone. Escaping with the twins meant abandoning him. He couldn't bring himself to do that. Instead, he'd have to strike even if it was risky. Midoriya pushed the twins behind his back, telling them to stay put. He hoped using his quirk here wouldn't rebound like before, but he couldn't second-guess it anymore. He pushed off with 20% of One for All, knocking out dozens of villains as he got closer to Dabi. "What are you doing?" shouted Dabi. "I've got these guys." "Just focus on Shigaraki," said Midoriya. Dabi simply grunted his disapproval, knowing Midoriya wouldn't listen to whatever he said in the moment. One by one, the villains were knocked out by Midoriya's strong kicks. However, more reserves filled the hall. Luckily, Midoriya thought, they were crowding him alone. That was until he heard Yuya. "Aizu!" cried Yuya. The world seemed to move in slow motion as Midoriya looked back towards her running towards him. Out of the corner of his eye, Midoriya saw a dark mass charging him. That familiar dark coat and black hair fluttering as the figure quickly approached, a knife and azure flame in hand. The bloodlust in Dabi's eyes penetrated Midoriya's soul. His battle instincts crashed as he watched his lover attack him. "Yuya!" shouted Yuta, following suit and jumping between his sister and the approaching villain. Dabi's face twisted into Toga's ever-familiar grin, snapping Midoriya out of his trance, and he dove to pull the kids into safety before they were hit. All three were swept up in a whirlwind inferno too bright for their eyes. The twins clung on as Midoriya held them to his chest. Midoriya forced his eyes open slightly to take note of what happened. A dark trench coat swayed amongst the sea of flames. Dabi had managed to intercept the attack, but only at a great cost to his own body. His right arm turned to ash in a split second. Blood gushed from his shoulder. He stumbled back just out of Shigaraki's reach, avoiding a fatal blow. Midoriya choked at the sight. He pulled Yuya and Yuta behind him as he rose to his feet, ready to jump in. "Stay back, Izuku!" yelled Dabi, halting Midoriya instantly. "Please. Your only responsibility now is to protect Yuya and Yuta." All three were speechless. It was the first time Dabi used their names. Midoriya knew the children needed to be his priority in this situation, but his heart cried out, tearing away at his resolve. "Look at your state right now." Midoriya searched desperately for anything he could say to convince Dabi to let him help or escape together. "How are you going to defeat Endeavor if you die here?" he cried out, reaching out to Dabi. "That at some point you became more important than anything else, even my revenge," whispered Dabi, his voice barely audible above the chaos. "Maybe you were right earlier. So, I've made my final decision. I will live and die for you." "But how am I supposed to live without you?" asked Midoriya, choking back tears. "In the eyes of the court, I'd be put to death anyway, Izuku. Let me do this my way." Dabi looked back at Midoriya, a faint smile on his face. One last look. One last goodbye. Dabi's eyes glowed with a sadness Midoriya had only seen in one other person, someone with the same blue eyes. Abandonment. Neglect. Self-hatred. All they ever wanted was for someone to love them, but those dreams were crushed the moment their freedom was stolen away, forced to live out someone else's dream. Their hatred propelled them onto a path of destruction. Todoroki found a support system before it was too late, but Dabi was completely alone. Now, once again, that dream was being torn apart along with any hope of love and acceptance. The contained fire separating the villains from Midoriya and the children quickly spread, engulfing the hall and everything inside, including Dabi. The flames twirled up his body, skin slowly catching fire, blisters forming, and his clothes turning to ash. Screams and curses from the remaining villains were nearly drowned out by the crackling of the inferno. Beyond the sea of blue, Dabi's figure was merely a blur. Midoriya wanted to jump into the wall of fire to protect Dabi from his own flames. However, he knew Dabi wouldn't want that. They both made their choices. Perhaps the only choices available to them. It took everything to not give in to the urge to save him, so Midoriya took a small hand from each of the twins. He needed to focus solely on protecting the children until they could reach safety. They looked up at their protector, concern filling their small bodies as they watched the tears fall from Midoriya's eyes. "Let's go." The scene behind Midoriya lit the night sky as he ran far from the villains. Everything in sight seemed to glow that appealing blue as the flames spread to the surrounding forest. The same blue as the eyes he so easily got lost in. Everything went silent. Midoriya could feel the ground beneath his feet. He kept a hold on the twins on his back, and he could feel Yuya's tears soaking into his sleeve. However, he couldn't hear anything. His body moved forward, but his mind remained trapped. Was there something he could have done differently? Should he have stayed? This was the only option, right? Could things have been different? Would Dabi still be alive if Midoriya hadn't fallen in love with him? Was this his fault? "Izuku! Look, there's people up ahead," shouted Yuya. "Heroes." The eruption must have alerted them. As Midoriya neared the approaching heroes, he could make out some of the local heroes along with more familiar faces like Endeavor and Mr. Aizawa. Beyond his teacher, he saw two figures struggling to get past. Todoroki. Kaken. Not even bothering to acknowledge the heroes, Midoriya raced past, jumping into the arms of the two people who had been there for him the most these last few months. He wrapped an arm around each of their necks, pulling them close. "How'd you guys know I was here?" asked Midoriya. Todoroki returned the hug with a hand on Midoriya's arm as he answered. "They were sloppier this time when they kidnapped you. One of the guards they attacked was able to give some information that led us to this city. Then the explosion drew us here." "How many times do you plan to get captured this year, you nerd?" shouted Bakugou. "You can't talk, Bakugou." "You were kidnapped once too," said Todoroki. "Shut up. And how long until you tell us why these kids are with you?" "You've got stinky breath," said Yuta, scrunching up his nose at Bakugou. Midoriya looked over his shoulder, suddenly remembering his extra baggage. Each twin was clutching his shoulders for dear life, nearly nose to nose with Bakugou and Todoroki. Midoriya jumped back, gently crouching down to let them off. "I'm so sorry, kids. I was just so happy to find help that I just forgot we were here," said Yuta. "Shush. Let Izuku be happy for a minute," said Yuya. "Give me that brat. Someone's got to teach him a lesson," shouted Bakugou. Midoriya nervously smiled at his childhood friend, trying to think of how to refuse the demand. "Midoriya," said Mr. Aizawa, "we need you to tell us everything that happened." Flashes of the last 24 hours obstructed all the adrenaline keeping Midoriya stable. He nodded, knowing he couldn't avoid it forever. Midoriya gave his teacher the basic rundown of the situation, leaving out some of the more private conversations he had with Dabi. Containing the fire and the following investigation were left to the pro-heroes. Although Midoriya wanted to stay in hopes of hearing how the situation ended up, he realized it'd be impossible to know what happened for sure. Dabi's power was so intense it would have incinerated everything, including himself. So, he didn't argue when Mr. Aizawa told him to follow them back to the police station for a report. Todoroki gently rubbed Midoriya's back, leading him towards the police car, but Midoriya stopped in his tracks when he heard Yuya sobbing and Yuta screaming for someone to let go of his sister. "What's going on?" asked Midoriya, running over to the police officer gripping Yuya's tiny wrist. "We need to take these children to the station, but they are struggling." "Can't they go in the same car as me?" asked Midoriya. "Midoriya," started Mr. Aizawa. "We're going to the same place, right?" "So, why not?" interrupted Midoriya. "Those two were the reason you were brainwashed, correct?" asked Mr. Aizawa, holding his hand up to silence Midoriya before he could answer. "They need to be processed separately for now, so that we can see how your state of mind is after coming in contact with them again. They are just kids, Sensei. They are orphans. They have nowhere to go. I promise they weren't with the League by choice." "That's fine, but that doesn't change anything. You don't have to worry though. I'll make sure they are okay, and we will figure out how to house them later. For now, calm them down and let's go." "Why, you're going to abandon us too, aren't you?" screamed Yuta, hiding Yuya behind his back, seemingly protecting her from everyone in the area. "No. I promise I'll do what I can for you." Midoriya quickly kneeled in front of Yuta, pleading for him to understand, but Yuta obviously didn't believe a word of it. Considering that they've been with the League so long, they probably know things they shouldn't. Odds are, they will be put in UA like Eri to protect them from being attacked. Bakugou stood behind Midoriya, not bothering to look at them. "Right?" he asked as he turned his head towards Mr. Aizawa. "I won't promise anything." Mr. Aizawa rubbed his tired eyes as he saw the expressions on the children. Yuya barely stopped her sobs and Yuta trembled waiting for an answer. "But if they are determined to be of low risk, then yes, they will probably move in with Eri." "See? That's great, right? And Eri is just about your age. She's really sweet too. You'd like her a lot." Midoriya smiled gently, waiting for the kids to respond. When they didn't, he pulled them into a hug. "Just be the good kids I know you are, and we'll see each other again before you know it. Okay?" Yuya tightened her grip on the back of Midoriya's shirt and nodded into his shoulder, still trying not to cry. Yuta took a moment to decide, but he soon nodded as well, his arms falling limp to his sides. To keep them feeling as comfortable as possible, Midoriya took them to the car and buckled them in himself. He kept his smile as he watched them drive off. Then he let his face fall. No one spoke. Instead, Todoroki and Bakugou led Midoriya to their car. A police officer slid into the driver's seat as Todoroki made sure Midoriya was buckled up, seeming too consumed in his own mind to accomplish basic functions. Only the racing wind outside filled the back seat of the police car. Bakugou and Todoroki sat silently on either side of Midoriya as he stared blankly at his limp hands in his lap. His mind seemed blank, but also tired. He was on edge, happy to not feel or see anything, but knowing he was barely keeping the memories at bay. Then it happened. A flash of blue raced through his mind. Flames. Chaos. A disheartened smile. A hand pulled Midoriya's head down to rest on Todoroki's shoulder, snapping him out of his trance. He felt a firm hand grip his on the opposite side. Midoriya looked out of the corner of his eye to see his and Bakugou's hands connected as Bakugou watched the passing scenery. "It's okay to cry, Midoriya," said Todoroki. It hadn't registered to Midoriya that he could feel something trickling down to his chin. Once he made this realization, they only grew in size. Tightening his grip on Bakugou's hand, Midoriya sobbed into Todoroki's shoulder. It was the only option, right? He would have been killed regardless, right? Todoroki tightened his arm around Midoriya's trembling shoulders. "Right. You did your best." He wasn't sure about the specifics of what happened. Midoriya had been vague when telling them the situation, but in that moment he felt that if he said the wrong thing then the boy in his arms would break. Even Bakugou couldn't make one of his usual snide remarks, so Todoroki could only agree and hope that his touch comforted Midoriya. After this, neither Bakugou nor Todoroki would agree to Midoriya sleeping alone or suching out, so all three slept together for a while. Midoriya thought it was a bit awkward, but he was happy he wasn't alone. At first, there was a lot of arguing between Bakugou and Todoroki, but eventually, they calmed down enough to rest in silence. Midoriya glanced over to peek at Todoroki, leading Todoroki to fully turn on his side towards Midoriya with a smile. Midoriya stared up into Todoroki's eyes, specifically his blue eye. They looked exactly the same. He wondered how he never noticed before. Should he tell Todoroki about Dabi's true identity? What about Endeavor? Knowing would probably only hurt them. Perhaps this was a secret Dabi best took to the grave. "Is something wrong, Midoriya?" asked Todoroki. "No. I was just looking," whispered Midoriya. Todoroki smiled and blushed but found it hard to keep eye contact. "Stop flirting and go to sleep," yelled Bakugou. Midoriya didn't have to be facing Bakugou to know the vein in his forehead was probably bulging out, so they all tried to rest. Every time Midoriya attempted to close his eyes, he saw blue flames. If he kept them closed long enough, he could see Dabi standing just out of reach with that sad smile staring back at him. If he didn't open his eyes soon, he'd be able to make out the blisters and melting skin, and before long he could even smell burning flesh. Midoriya's eyes burst open. Once he steadied his breathing again, he tried to keep his eyes open as much as he could. They stung as they dried out. Each night that passed, his eyes grew more and more tired. To distract himself, he'd try to find something in the room to entertain his mind. Counting ceiling tiles, listening for his bedmates to talk in their sleep, identifying when and where he got each of his hero memorabilia. Midoriya found he'd stare at Todoroki's sleeping face most nights, a calm coming over his constantly overwhelmed mind. He found every breath, every hair falling in place, every flutter in his eyelids endearing. Midoriya couldn't figure out what the real reason was for this. Was it simply seeing someone at peace, or perhaps these were old feelings finally showing back up? Maybe it was because of the features Todoroki shared with the man Midoriya could only see in his dreams. He hoped that wasn't it, because Todoroki deserved better than that. Strong arms wrapped around Midoriya's waist as he felt Bakugou's steady breathing against his neck. Surprisingly, Midoriya found comfort being held by his childhood friend. He muffled his own laughter at the thought of such a stubborn man reaching out for cuddles in his sleep. His scarred hands slid up to hold onto Bakugou's arms, a gentle smile spreading across his face. Safety. Warmth. These were the things Midoriya felt with these two amazing heroes by his side. It'd be a long while before he could forget the pain of the past year, but with these two he felt he could get through it. Pink petals floated through the air leading the way to the front gates of UA as the new graduates looked back at their school for the last time. Family and friends lined the path cheering for the students. Midoriya looked out into the crowd, searching for the smiles of his mother and the children he helped save over the course of his 4 years at university. In the 3 years since he met them, they grew into young teens causing as much trouble as he and his classmates had. Yuya had her long hair half up in braids and curls with a bright smile on her face. The braids must have been Eri's work, Midoriya thought. The once timid Eri was jumping up and down trying to get Midoriya's attention, so he waved back with his famous smile. Yuta still hadn't learned to show his true feelings. He crossed his arms over his chest, mimicking Bakugou's usual irritable stance. However, he kept glancing over with a slight blush on his face. Even if he didn't want to show his soft side, it started slipping out as he became more comfortable at UA. The once purely identical twins no longer sported the same clothes or haircut. Yuta decided to cut his hair short, similar to Todoroki, and had grown several inches taller than Yuya. Even Koda made an appearance. He had grown about as tall as Yuta. He was proudly raising his fist in the air to congratulate Midoriya's class. A couple of girls behind Midoriya started giggling when Eri accidentally brushed against Koda's arm, earning a deepening blush from the boy. Midoriya couldn't believe how long it had been since he met them all. Seeing them grow brought him more pride than being a hero. He imagined how they looked 3 years back. Within his daydream, he also saw a lone dark figure standing behind them. It took a long time to suppress the memories of the past. To not hear the screams. To not smell burning flesh. To replace that somber smile with one of affection. Dabi could be at peace, at least in Midoriya's daydreams. Time heals wounds. Izuku, you're falling behind. A large hand slipped into Midoriya's, interlocking their fingers. Midoriya's face heated up. He hadn't quite gotten used to his boyfriend calling him by his given name even after a year of dating. Midoriya had a large support system while he went to therapy and worked through his foggy memories. Even with 2 amazing men acting as his pillars of support, he couldn't bring himself to give them a proper answer until his memories from before his kidnapping were straightened out. In fact, it was exactly a year to the day that it finally clicked. The memory of the moment he fell in love, before he ever met Dabi. Throughout Midoriya's life, he had been bullied and told he wasn't good enough. Not good enough to be a hero, a friend, or even a living human being. He had felt worthless until he was chosen by his idol to be his successor. Even then, though, he carried those feelings around with him. He needed to be stronger, smarter, better. He needed to prove his worth. However, his best quality was something he had since BR. It wasn't until several months into their first year that Midoriya received the words he needed to realize this. You are more than your quirk. It's your determination and kindness that moves people. No matter what, no matter how much someone wants you to stay out of their business, you can't leave someone alone until you help them. Because of you, our whole class has something to work towards. That includes me. After this, Midoriya found his heart racing whenever they made eye contact. His eyes followed him in and out of the classroom. Although they were friends now, Midoriya couldn't help but worry what it would mean if he wanted to be more. Would their friendship dissolve? Would the person who gave him confidence in himself suddenly hate him? There was nothing holding him back anymore, though. The moment he unlocked that memory, those words, he jumped out of his chair in his therapist's office and ran all the way back to the dorms, completely unaware he was using his quirk. The doors burst open, shocking his classmates. Midoriya scanned the room as his classmates tried to question his abrupt appearance, but he couldn't find the person he needed to see. Without bothering to acknowledge anyone, he ran up to his dorm room. No luck. Where would he be if not here when it was so late? It clicked. He opened the hallway window and jumped out. Somewhere behind him, he heard Ida yelling not to jump out of windows, but Midoriya was too focused on finally giving them an answer. He didn't care about anything else. As he neared the gym, Midoriya noticed 2 figures exiting, Bakugou and Kirishima. Kirishima was the first to notice him. Midobro, what are you in a rush for? He asked as Bakugou made eye contact with Midoriya. Midoriya skidded to a stop in front of the 2. What the hell, nerd? Shouted Bakugou. You're going to knock people out if you crash into them at that speed. Kaken, Midoriya looked up into Bakugou's eyes, then hesitantly glanced down at his shoes. Everything went still as silence built. Taking a deep breath, Midoriya raised his green eyes to meet Bakugou's crimson. I'm sorry, Kaken, but I'm in love with someone else. Before Bakugou could respond, Midoriya was off again. Bakugou stood still for a moment while Kirishima waited for his reaction. Unlike his usual demeanor, Bakugou stayed silent and started walking back to the dorm with Kirishima in tow. Kirishima could see the light pink at the corners of Bakugou's eyes and the downturned corners of his mouth. Bakugou stuffed his hands deep into his pockets to hide their trembling. Midoriya knew that was the only way that rejection could go. Bakugou would have never wanted him to stay or console him. He'd want to be alone to deal with his feelings. All Midoriya could do was be honest with both Bakugou and Todoroki. He slowed down as he saw Todoroki walking out of the locker room. Midoriya's heart stopped for a moment, unable to breathe at the sight. He had raced there, but suddenly realized he didn't know what to say. Todoroki smiled as he finally noticed Midoriya on the other side of the gym. With each step, Midoriya's heart and mind panicked. He had to come up with something to say before Todoroki reached him. "What's wrong, Midoriya?" asked Todoroki. Midoriya couldn't think. So, he let his body move on its own. He pulled Todoroki's shirt down as he raised up on his tiptoes. A simple, gentle kiss on the lips surprised Todoroki. He didn't dare move. When Midoriya slowly pulled away, he opened his eyes to see how frozen Todoroki looked. Fiddling with his fingers, Midoriya nervously said, "I'm sorry. Was that not okay? Does this mean you like me?" Midoriya nodded. "I love you, Todoroki," he stuttered. He was barely able to get the words out before he felt Todoroki's embrace. He happily returned the hug. Neither said a thing for what seemed like several minutes until Midoriya's anxiety got to him. "Todoroki? Are you going to say anything?" "Oh dash," Todoroki pulled away, thinking about what he should say in return, but he had never been good with words. Instead, he gently stroked Midoriya's cheek before leaning in close. Midoriya's face flushed. "I love you too." Pink petals floated through the air leading the way to the front gates of UA as the new graduate, Midoriya, thought back on his fond memories. Amongst the cheers of those celebrating their graduation, only Todoroki could hear Midoriya giggling to himself. That sweet voice warmed his heart. Intertwining their hands, Todoroki let Midoriya know that the rest of their class was already going ahead. Earning that famous Midoriya smile, Todoroki squeezed his hand. He couldn't believe his luck. Midoriya was the reason he could look past his hatred and thoughts of revenge on his father. He was the one who made him feel free to do whatever and be whoever he wanted. "Izuku, I love you." "I love you too, Shoto,"